Good evening and welcome to this quiet doorway into the world of Athene. Tonight we will move slowly through her stories, her symbols, and the long shadow she cast across the ancient Greek imagination. Athene is the goddess of wisdom, yes, but also of craft, measured thought, practical skill, civic life, and the kind of courage that does not rush. She belongs to temples and poems, to workshops and battlefields, to olive trees and bright helmets, to the patient work of making things well. And as the night grows still, we can let all of that unfold in a softer way. If you enjoy these calm journeys through mythology and the ancient world, you are welcome to like the video, subscribe for more quiet stories, or leave a gentle comment about where you are listening from tonight. You might also share what subject would be comforting to explore next. There is never any hurry here, only the slow turning of the hour. Settle your shoulders, let the room dim around you. Imagine the subject ahead as a doorway of marble and shadow, open just a little, enough for moonlight to pass through. We will not hurry inside. We will simply step forward at an easy pace and begin with Athene as the Greeks remembered her, alert, composed, and endlessly present in their stories. Athene is one of the most enduring figures in Greek religion because she sits at the meeting point of many important ideas. She is not only a war goddess and not only a goddess of wisdom. In the ancient imagination, she belongs to the careful side of power, the side that plans, shapes, measures, and protects. That made her especially useful to the Greeks, who valued both intelligence and discipline. Her presence could be felt in stories about kings, heroes, craftspeople, cities, and household order. She was not remote in the way some divine figures seem to be. Instead, she appeared close to human life, especially where skill and judgment mattered. One reason Athene remained so central is that her character was flexible enough to fit many settings. She could stand beside a warrior, guide a builder, inspire a weaver, or guard a city wall. Different regions emphasized different aspects of her, but the core idea remained steady. She was a goddess of controlled strength, a kind of brightness that did not burn wildly but stayed clear and watchful. This helped her become one of the great civic deities of Greece, especially in Athens, the city that took her name into its own identity. Her long life in the myths shows how deeply the Greeks admired intelligence that was practical, not merely abstract. Athene was not just about thinking. She was about thinking well and then acting with discipline. Her famous birth is one of the most unusual in Greek myth, and that strangeness helped define her from the beginning. The story says she did not arrive through ordinary divine birth. Instead, she emerged from Zeus himself, already grown and fully armed. Ancient poets loved the dramatic force of this image. It made Athene seem immediate, complete, and unmistakably powerful. She was not a helpless child who slowly became a goddess. She appeared in a state of readiness, as though wisdom itself had taken form in an instant. The myth is often told with some variation. Zeus may have swallowed her mother, Metis, who represented wise counsel and cunning intelligence, because he feared a prophecy. Later, with great divine force, Athene burst forth from his head. The details shift from source to source, but the symbolic shape remains clear. Athene comes from thought, from the mind, from a place above brute force. This made her a fitting goddess for strategists, lawmakers, and those who trusted careful judgment. Ancient audiences would have heard more than a surprising birth story. They would have recognized a theological idea. Athene was a goddess who belonged to intellect as much as to the battlefield. Her origin suggested that wisdom can be sudden, brilliant, and fully formed, not always slow and gradual. In the quiet language of myth, that birth said something enduring about the Greek idea of excellence. Athene's association with Zeus is one of the clearest ways to understand her place among the Olympian gods. She is very close to him, and yet not simply a lesser copy of his authority. Instead, she often acts as his trusted agent, especially when strategy, order, and wise intervention are needed. Many myths show her supporting Zeus's rule, but never in a way that makes her seem passive. She has her own strong presence, her own intelligence, and her own judgment. This closeness to Zeus gave her special dignity in the pantheon. She was one of the most respected of the gods because she seemed to reflect the disciplined side of divine power. Where other deities might embody passion, excess, or sudden force, Athene often represented balance. She could be stern, but she was rarely careless. In stories where the gods are noisy, quarrelsome, and unpredictable, Athene often appears as the one who sees the shape of a problem before others do. Her relationship to Zeus also explains why she was so often involved in matters of order and legitimacy. Heroes who won her favor were not merely strong. They were usually clever, composed, or devoted to an important task. In that sense, Athene did not just serve Zeus. She helped define what a just and successful order looked like in the divine world. One of Athene's most recognizable symbols is the owl, a bird that came to stand for watchfulness and wisdom. The connection is easy to understand even now. An owl sees in darkness. It moves quietly. It seems to know what is hidden. For the ancient Greeks, these qualities matched Athene beautifully. She was a goddess who could perceive things that others missed, and the owl became a natural emblem of that careful vision. Athenian coins often featured the owl in a powerful and simple design, and this helped make the bird one of the most famous symbols of the ancient city. The image was not decorative alone. It communicated identity, value, and civic pride. To carry an owl-bearing coin was to carry a small piece of Athens itself. The bird was also associated with alertness at night, a quality that suited a deity connected with clear thought rather than dreamy confusion. In mythology, symbols often do more than identify a god. They condense a whole character into a single image. The owl does this for Athene better than almost any other creature could. It suggests stillness, intelligence, and the ability to remain awake when others are not. That is one reason the symbol endured so long. It felt true to the goddess and easy to remember, a calm little sign of her presence. Athene's helmet is another of her lasting images, and it reveals something important about her nature. Unlike some war deities who embody wild combat, Athene's armed appearance suggests discipline and readiness. Her helmet is a sign that she understands conflict, but does not revel in chaos. She is prepared, organized, and fully aware of what war demands. In many depictions, the helmet sits alongside other carefully chosen objects, including a spear and a shield, making her look less like a furious fighter and more like a strategist in divine form. The helmet also matters because it shapes how people imagine her in art. A goddess can be graceful, but when Athene wears armor, her grace becomes severe and intelligent. She is not softened by the adornment. Instead, the gear reinforces her authority. Ancient artists used the helmet to help viewers recognize her instantly, and it became part of her standard visual identity across centuries. There is a quiet tension in this image. Athene is a goddess of thought, but she is not detached from the world's dangers. She understands conflict deeply enough to stand ready for it. The helmet tells us that wisdom in Greek mythology is not only for libraries or councils. Sometimes wisdom must put on bronze and stand watch. Athene's most famous city was Athens, and the relationship between goddess and city became one of the great sacred associations in the ancient world. The city did not merely honor her, it saw itself through her. In return, Athene became woven into the civic identity of Athens so thoroughly that her name and the city's name seem almost inseparable. The people of Athens imagined their patron goddess as a guardian of public life, law, architecture, learning, and skilled craftsmanship. This bond was expressed in festivals, temples, coins, and stories. The city's major religious and artistic achievements often carried her presence in some form. To live in Athens was to live under the sign of a goddess who valued order, excellence, and public flourishing. Her protection was not abstract. It was tied to how the city saw itself and what it wished to become. The relationship also explains why Athene was such a powerful cultural symbol in later history. When people think of classical Athens, they often imagine not only democracy and philosophy, but also the goddess who stood over them as a kind of divine emblem of the city's ideals. That association became one of the strongest in Greek religion, and it still shapes how Athene is remembered today. Athene's role as a protector was not limited to large cities and famous heroes. She was also strongly connected to weaving, spinning, and skilled domestic labor. This may seem gentle compared with her martial side, but in the Greek world, weaving was no minor task. It required patience, intelligence, control, and technical knowledge. A good weaver needed an understanding of pattern and structure, much as a good strategist needed an understanding of movement and timing. Because of this, Athene became a patron of craftspeople and makers. She belonged to the quiet discipline of hands that know what they are doing. The loom, the thread, and the finished cloth were not separate from wisdom in her world. They were expressions of it. In many myths, this link between intellect and craft becomes especially important as Athene teaches or supports those whose skill shapes daily life. This is part of what makes her so humanly appealing. She is a goddess of grandeur, but she also honors ordinary labor done well. Her presence suggests that careful work can be sacred. A woven pattern, a well-joined ship, a precisely measured plan, all can belong to the same divine principle that guides the city and the hero. Athene's olive tree is one of the most tender and enduring parts of her mythology. In the famous contest for patronage of Athens, she offered the olive tree, while Poseidon offered a saltwater spring or some other dramatic gift depending on the version. The olive was the quieter offering, but it was also the more useful one. It symbolized peace, nourishment, oil, wood, and long-term value. The city chose Athene's gift because it represented steady prosperity rather than spectacle. The olive tree became a lasting emblem of her relationship to civilization itself. It grows slowly, but it endures. It feeds, heals, and supports ordinary life. In that sense, it reflected Athene's own qualities very well. She was not only the goddess of bright moments and heroic crises, she was also the guardian of sustainable life, of practical benefit, of what allows a community to continue. There is something very calming in this symbol. The tree does not shout. It stands rooted and patient, offering its fruit and shade. For ancient Greeks, that was not a small gift. It was a sign of divine wisdom expressed through usefulness. Athene's olive tree remains one of the clearest reminders that her power was often quiet, durable, and deeply tied to the daily life of a city. Athene's first 10 facts already show how broad her influence was, but they also reveal a pattern. She is most often associated with what is stable, skilled, and deliberate. That is why she appears so often in stories of founders, artisans, and heroes. She does not simply cause miracles. She guides, instructs, and protects. In the oldest layers of Greek tradition, this made her unusually valuable. She could connect the household to the city, the workshop to the palace, and the battlefield to the council room. A goddess-like that could not remain on the margins. She belonged to the core of how Greeks imagined a well-ordered life. And so, as we move deeper into her world, we begin to see that Athene is not a single image at all. She is a whole constellation of meanings, each one linked by thought, restraint, and purpose. Athene is often described as a virgin goddess, and in ancient religion that word carried a meaning broader than later ideas of celibacy alone. It suggested independence, self-possession, and a kind of authority not defined by marriage. This status helped distinguish her from many other goddesses in the Greek world. She stood outside ordinary domestic bonds, which gave her a unique freedom in myth and worship. She could move among gods and mortals without being absorbed into the role of wife or mother. That independence did not make her distant or cold. Instead, it made her especially suitable as a guardian of cities and public life. She belonged to a sphere where loyalty, order, and discipline mattered more than romantic entanglement. Ancient Greeks often imagined her as steady and self-contained, a figure whose power came from mastery rather than dependence. This aspect of Athene also shaped the way she was represented in stories. She is often helpful to heroes, yet she remains apart from the emotional turbulence that drives many myths. Her virginity is therefore not just a biographical detail. It is part of her symbolic character, one more way in which she stands for purity of purpose and clarity of mind. Athene was especially admired for intelligence that could be applied in practical ways. In modern terms, we might say she represents strategic thinking, but the ancient Greek world expressed this more broadly. She was the goddess who understood how to use what one had, how to solve problems, how to make a plan work in the real world. This quality made her important not only to warriors, but also to judges, rulers, inventors, and craftspeople. Her intelligence was often described through words connected to skill, counsel, and cleverness. This meant she was not merely wise in an abstract sense. She knew how to act wisely when the moment came. The Greeks valued this combination deeply because brilliance without discipline could be dangerous. Athene embodied a more balanced ideal. She could think, judge, and then choose a course that was effective. That is one reason she appears so often in myths involving difficult choices. She is the goddess to whom people turn when a situation requires more than strength. Her wisdom is calm, exacting, and useful, which gives her a lasting presence in the imagination. Athene's shield, called the aegis in many traditions, is among her most famous attributes. In some stories it is associated with Zeus as well, and in others it becomes especially linked to Athene's protective power. The aegis often carries the head of the Gorgon Medusa, a frightening image meant to drive enemies away. This makes it both beautiful and terrifying, a fitting combination for a goddess who protects through fear as well as strength. In ancient art, the aegis can appear as a cloak, a breastplate, or a distinctive protective skin. Whatever its precise form, it signals divine authority and defensive force. Athene is not only a strategist from a distance, she also shields those under her care. Her protection is active and sometimes intimidating. She does not merely comfort, she deters threats. The aegis shows how Greek mythology often blended symbols in layered ways. A goddess of wisdom can also carry a fearsome shield, because wisdom itself may require the ability to ward off danger. In Athene's case, knowledge and protection belong together. The result is one of the most recognizable divine images in all of classical mythology. Athene's involvement in the Trojan War is one of the major reasons she became such a familiar figure across Greek literature. Unlike gods who simply choose a side out of preference or anger, Athene's actions often reflect a particular understanding of strategy and justice. She supports the Greeks in many versions of the story because she values intelligence, discipline, and ordered heroism. She is especially offended by arrogance and folly, which makes her responses sharp and memorable. In the epic world, Athene frequently guides important Greek figures, helping them see through danger or act at the right moment. She does not usually win the war by brute force. Instead, she influences outcomes through insight, disguise, and timely intervention. That makes her one of the most cinematic gods in the old stories, though ancient audiences would not have thought of it that way. They would have seen her as the divine intelligence behind many crucial turns. Her role in the Trojan cycle also shows her complexity. She can be compassionate toward favored mortals, but relentless toward those who violate honor or order. In that balance, she becomes a goddess who understands war not as excitement, but as a serious field where judgment matters. Athene's most famous city-temple complex on the Acropolis was the Parthenon, one of the great monuments of the ancient world. While the building itself has many histories, its connection to Athene made it more than architecture. It became a statement of civic devotion, artistic excellence, and cultural ambition. The temple housed a renowned cult image of the goddess, and the building's sculptural programs reflected her importance in the life of Athens. The Parthenon stood on high ground, visible across the city, and this placement mattered. It reminded the people below that Athene watched over them from above, both literally and symbolically. The structure was not only a place for ritual, it was a visual expression of the city's values. Harmony, proportion, and strength all seem to echo the goddess herself. When later generations admire the Parthenon, they often do so for its beauty. The ancient Athenians would have seen beauty, yes, but also presence. Athene was there in stone, in scale, in alignment, and in the care with which the building spoke to the heavens. It remains one of the clearest material signs of her long cultural life. Athene was frequently called upon as a helper of heroes, but the heroes she favored were usually not the simplest or strongest figures. She often preferred those who were thoughtful, adaptable, and capable of learning. This makes her a very interesting divine patron because she does not merely reward bravery, she rewards intelligence in action. Odysseus is the most famous example. His cunning, patience, and ability to think his way through difficulty align closely with Athene's own qualities. In many stories, she favors him because he resembles her in spirit. He is resourceful rather than reckless, and he survives by judgment as much as by strength. Athene's support of him reveals how much she values clever endurance. This pattern appears in other myths as well. Heroes who listen, observe, and adjust are often more likely to receive her aid than those who rush ahead blindly. Through this, Athene becomes a divine teacher of sorts. She does not abolish hardship, but she helps the worthy navigate it. Athene's relationship with crafts extends beyond weaving into the broader idea of tekhen, the Greek sense of art, technique, and practical skill. She can be understood as a patron of making things well, whether those things are weapons, garments, buildings, or plans. This is why she connects so naturally to artisans and inventors. In the Greek world, skill was not merely mechanical, it was intellectual. To make something properly required knowledge, attention, and disciplined judgment. Athene embodied that union of mind and hand. She was not a goddess of idle contemplation. She was a goddess of accomplished work. This is visible in stories where she teaches or inspires specific crafts. Her influence on human labor becomes a quiet way of expressing civilization itself. If chaos is what happens when nothing is properly joined, Athene is the goddess of joining things correctly. Athene's contests with other figures often highlight her strong sense of honor. She can be patient, but she is not indifferent. When insulted or challenged, she responds with remarkable force, yet her responses are usually framed as corrections to arrogance or foolishness. This reflects a broader Greek value. Excellence must be matched by humility and proper respect. Her rivalry with Arachne is one of the clearest examples. The story is often remembered for transformation and punishment, but beneath that, it is a tale about skill, pride, and the limits of human self-assertion. Athene does not object to talent. She objects to the kind of pride that denies the source of one's gifts or mocks what is sacred. That makes her a very serious goddess in myth. She is generous to the disciplined, but severe toward contempt. Ancient audiences may have seen in her a divine version of the principle that skill must be joined to respect. A beautiful craft done with arrogance can still fail in the larger moral order. Athene's birth from Zeus's head also made her especially associated with the mind itself. It is one of mythology's most memorable images because it turns the body into a metaphor. Wisdom emerges from the head, the place of thought and judgment. That symbolic logic was powerful to ancient audiences, and it helped make Athene a goddess of intelligence in a very literal sense. The story also suggests that wisdom belongs to authority, but not simply because authority commands. Rather, it implies that good rule should arise from thought. Athene is born from the head of the king of gods, as though to say that power must have intelligence within it if it is to be worthy of respect. This is one reason she became so important in civic religion. Cities need leaders, laws, and coordinated action. Athene is the goddess who sanctifies those things when they are guided by measure and reason. Her mythic birth, therefore, becomes not just a wonder tale, but a statement about how the Greeks understood the best kind of power. Athene's presence in myth often feels cool and lucid, but that does not mean she lacks feeling. Rather, her emotions are shaped by principle. She can show favor, protect the vulnerable, or punish the insolent, yet she rarely seems ruled by impulse alone. That balance is part of her distinction. This made her appealing in a world that respected self-control. The Greeks did not necessarily admire unrestrained emotion in their deities. They admired force that had direction. Athene represents exactly that. Her clarity makes her dependable, and her dependence on principle makes her memorable. As we move further into her world, we can already see how she became more than a goddess of war or wisdom. She became a model of intelligent order, a symbol of skill joined to restraint, and a divine companion to the human desire to do things well. One of the most familiar qualities of Athene is the way she moves through myth with a kind of composed stillness, and that stillness often reflects her connection to practical intelligence rather than impulsive force. She is not usually the goddess who arrives with thunderous emotional display. Instead, she tends to appear where there is a problem that requires clear thinking, measured strategy, and a willingness to see several steps ahead. Ancient writers repeatedly present her as the deity of Metis, a Greek word that can mean wisdom, counsel, cunning intelligence, or skillful planning, and that idea helps explain why she seems so deeply tied to human decision-making. In the quiet logic of Athene's character, wisdom is not just a lofty idea. It is something useful, something that can steady the hand, guide the builder, calm the warrior, or help a city choose its path. That is part of why her presence in mythology feels so enduring. She belongs to the place where thought becomes action, where a careful mind can shape the world without shouting. In some accounts, this intelligence is almost intimate, as if she understands not only what must be done, but also how to do it with grace, restraint, and perfect timing. The Greeks seem to have admired that balance. They did not always imagine wisdom as soft or gentle, but as disciplined, alert, and capable of surviving complexity. Athene embodies that kind of intelligence with remarkable calm. Closely tied to this is the striking image of Athene's birth, which is among the most memorable scenes in Greek myth. In the most famous version, she is born fully grown from the head of Zeus, often after Hephaestus splits open the god's skull with an axe. The image is dramatic, almost startling, yet it also carries symbolic weight that ancient audiences would have recognized. Athene does not begin life as a helpless infant in the usual sense. She arrives already complete, already armed, already capable. Scholars have long discussed what this extraordinary birth might mean, and there is no single settled answer. Some see it as a way of emphasizing her association with intellect rather than bodily generation. Others think it reflects older pre-Greek or Near Eastern patterns of divine emergence, later adapted into Olympian myth. The details vary across sources, and the older poems do not always tell the story in the same way. Even so, the central image remains the same. Wisdom emerges suddenly, fully formed, as if the mind itself had taken shape in divine light. It is an origin story that feels less like a childhood and more like a revelation. The myth also places her uniquely among the gods, since she is deeply tied to Zeus yet never simply absorbed by him. She is his daughter, but not in a passive sense. She is his mind made visible, his strategy given form, his clarity made into a person who can stand apart and speak for herself. That tension gives the story a quiet power that has lasted for centuries. Because Athene is so often associated with reason and strategic intelligence, she is also one of the main gods of warfare, though not in the same way as Ares. Ares represents the raw chaos of battle, the scream and the blood, the sudden crush of violence. Athene, by contrast, stands for disciplined warfare, the planning of campaigns, the protection of a city, and the kind of courage that does not lose its shape in the middle of danger. Ancient audiences seem to have understood this difference clearly. In epic poetry, she frequently advises heroes, adjusts their tactics, or lends them a steady, almost unnervingly clear awareness of what must be done. She does not glorify war for its own sake. Instead, she seems to view conflict as something that must be managed, contained, or redirected with intelligence. This makes her a more complex, and in some ways, more humanly useful divine figure than a simple war god. People could ask for her help not because they wanted destruction, but because they needed guidance, endurance, and the ability to protect what mattered. Her weapons, when she carries them, are therefore not just symbols of aggression, they are tools of vigilance. Her shield, her spear, and in some traditions the aegis, all suggest watchfulness rather than fury. Even in battle, she remains the goddess of clear seeing. That is probably why she became such a powerful emblem for the city of Athens itself, where military strength and civic intelligence were supposed to work together. The famous contest between Athene and Poseidon for patronage of Athens shows this civic quality beautifully. In the myth, both gods offer a gift to the city, and the citizens must decide which one they prefer. Poseidon strikes the ground and produces either salt water, a spring, or in some versions a horse, depending on the telling. Athene, meanwhile, gives the olive tree. The olive is not flashy. It does not crash the earth or roar with divine force. But it is steady, valuable, nourishing, and deeply connected to the rhythms of human life. It provides oil, food, wood, and a sense of continuity. The Athenians choose Athene's gift, and the city takes her name. There is something almost perfectly quiet about the symbolism of that choice. The olive tree does not demand attention the way a storm does. It grows slowly, patiently, and lives for a long time. It suggests cultivation rather than conquest, abundance rather than spectacle. In some versions of the story, Poseidon reacts with anger, which adds a faintly tragic note to the myth, as if the city has chosen a more restrained future over a more violent one. Scholars often note that this tale may also reflect the historical self-image of Athens, especially its desire to present itself as a center of civic order, craftsmanship, and agricultural stability. Whether or not the story preserves a very ancient memory, it beautifully captures Athene's role as the goddess whose gifts are meant to sustain life. She is the divine patron of useful things that endure. That sense of usefulness becomes even clearer when Athene is associated with weaving, spinning, and the arts of the household. In modern imagination, these crafts can seem separate from power, but in the ancient Greek world they were deeply serious forms of intelligence and skill. Weaving requires attention, patience, memory, pattern recognition, and a careful sense of order. It is a kind of thinking done with the hands. Athene's connection to textile work therefore makes perfect sense. She is the goddess of many crafts, and especially of those that transform raw material into something meaningful and structured. The loom becomes almost a mirror of thought itself, each thread crossing another in a pattern that must be held in the mind before it can be made real. One of the most famous myths connected with this aspect of Athene is the story of Arachne, the mortal weaver who challenged the goddess. The tale ends badly for Arachne, but it also reveals something fascinating about Greek attitudes toward excellence and competition. Arachne's work is brilliant, and Athene's response is not simply about vanity. It is also about the dangerous edge of human pride when skill begins to claim equality with divine order. The story can be read in many ways, and scholars have long debated whether it preserves an older folk tale or a moralizing poetic invention. Still, the underlying connection between weaving and intelligence remains strong. Athene governs the arts that build structure out of fragility. She is present in the precise motion of the shuttle, in the measured crossing of threads, in the patient transformation of chaos into pattern. It is an image that can feel almost soothing in its repetition. Another important dimension of Athene is her unusual relationship to virginity, which in the ancient Greek sense carries meanings that are broader and more culturally specific than the modern word might suggest. Athene is commonly called Parthenos, the Virgin, and this title does not simply refer to sexual status. It signals autonomy, self-possession, and a refusal to be defined through marriage or motherhood in the usual divine or social manner. In Greek myth, Many goddesses are powerfully tied to fertility, erotic desire, or domestic life. Athene stands somewhat apart from those roles. Her independence allows her to move through male-dominated heroic narratives without becoming absorbed into them. She can advise, protect, and challenge without being domesticated. This makes her especially important in the social imagination of ancient Athens, where she could serve as a symbol of civic order and disciplined identity. At the same time, her virginity does not mean emotional coldness, as modern readers sometimes assume. Rather, it marks a specific kind of strength that belongs to self-ownership and focused purpose. She is untouched not because she is diminished, but because she is complete in herself. Temples and festivals connected to Athene Parthenos would have reinforced this image, presenting her as a figure of dignity and serene control. Even in art, she often appears composed, her gaze direct, her posture upright, as if she were holding herself in perfect balance. That balance between authority and restraint is one of the most enduring features of her mythic identity. In the city of Athens, Athene was not only a mythic figure, but a deeply embedded civic presence. Her worship was woven into public life through festivals, rituals, statues, and the great cult image of Athene Parthenos that once stood in the Parthenon. The city did not treat her as a distant or abstract ideal. She was felt in architecture, in ceremony, and in the ordering of collective memory. The Panathenaea, the great festival in her honor, was among the most important events in the Athenian calendar. It included processions, sacrifices, athletic contests, and the offering of a new woven peplos, or robe, for her statue. The image of that robe, created through communal labor and presented with reverence, is especially beautiful. It transforms weaving into a civic act and makes textile craft part of religious devotion. The festival itself would have brought the city together in a display of unity, piety, and cultural confidence. Scholars sometimes see the Panathenaea as a kind of mirror for Athenian identity, since it combined religion, competition, and public participation in a way that reflected the city's values. Athene was not simply worshipped there. She was celebrated as the principle that held Athens together. Her presence in the urban landscape, on the Acropolis, and in public art gave the city a sacred center. Even today, the surviving ruins suggest that this was more than decoration. It was a physical expression of belonging, a place where civic pride and divine protection met in stone and ritual. Athene also appears in many myths as a helper of heroes, and these stories often reveal how she functions as a quiet force of orientation. She supports Odysseus throughout the Odyssey, guiding him with disguised appearances, timely interventions, and subtle instructions. Unlike a dramatic rescuer, she often works indirectly, preserving the hero's freedom while making sure he does not lose his way entirely. This is one of the most interesting things about her divine style. She does not erase human effort, she sharpens it. Odysseus still has to endure, decide, disguise himself, and suffer. Athene's help makes those acts possible but not effortless. In this sense, she resembles a teacher who supports without replacing the student's own intelligence. She also aids Perseus, providing him with the polished shield that allows him to see Medusa indirectly, an elegant solution that avoids direct destruction by force. These episodes have a cool clarity to them. Athene does not usually rely on brute strength when a better method exists. She encourages lateral thinking, caution, and the ability to meet danger without staring directly into it. Ancient readers may have found comfort in that. Heroism did not have to be reckless, it could be thoughtful. It could use reflection, literally and figuratively. In many of these stories, Athene's advice has the quality of a whisper that arrives exactly when needed, almost like a thought the hero has learned to trust. Her relationship with other gods and goddesses is equally revealing, especially because she often occupies a place of authority without sliding into chaos. Unlike some deities whose stories are dominated by rivalry, romance, or misrule, Athene tends to mediate between force and form. She can be stern, and she is not always gentle in her judgments, but she rarely appears confused about her own role. This gives her a kind of institutional stability in myth. When disputes arise among the gods or between gods and mortals, she often acts as the representative of measured consequence. In the Iliad, for example, she is deeply involved in the shaping of battle outcomes, yet her presence is more tactical than emotional. She stands at the edge of action with a mind that sees the larger pattern. Some scholars have suggested that Athena may preserve traces of an older warrior goddess tradition from the Bronze Age or earlier, perhaps linked to protection, sovereignty, or palace culture. Others are cautious about making such direct lines of descent. The evidence is suggestive but not final. What is clear is that by the classical period she had become a goddess who united intelligence, defense, craft, and civic order in a single powerful figure. That combination is part of why she remains so recognizable. She feels both ancient and practical, distant and strangely close. Even her symbols carry this quiet depth. The owl, so strongly associated with Athena, is a creature of night vision, silent movement, and alert watching. Its large eyes and still posture make it seem almost like a living emblem of the goddess's own awareness. In the city of Athens, owl imagery appears on coins and in art, reinforcing the connection between Athena, wisdom, and civic identity. The bird is not noisy or flamboyant. It does not announce itself loudly. It sees in darkness. That makes it a fitting companion for a goddess whose wisdom often operates in conditions of uncertainty. The aegis is another important symbol, sometimes described as a shield or protective goatskin bearing the head of Medusa. It carries a terrifying power, but again the emphasis is often on protection and deterrence rather than attack. The aegis suggests that Athena's strength is not merely about overpowering others. It is about creating a boundary that danger cannot cross easily. This is a subtle kind of power, one that can feel reassuring in myth. The presence of these symbols in art and literature also helped reinforce her identity over time, allowing different communities to recognize her as the same goddess even when details shifted. Ancient religion often worked through such layered images, where animal, object, and story came together to preserve a divine character across centuries. At the same time, Athena is not always wholly serene in the myths. She can be severe, and sometimes her strictness reveals the harshness embedded within the values she protects. Her punishments, especially in stories about disrespect or overreaching pride, remind us that wisdom in the ancient world was not always gentle or forgiving. It could be exacting. It could demand order even when that order feels uncomfortable to mortals. Yet this too belongs to her complexity. She represents not only intelligence but disciplined intelligence, not only skill but standards, not only protection but the costs that come with structure. This makes her one of the most compelling figures in Greek religion because she does not flatten into a single mood or function. She can be a city's guardian, a hero's guide, a craftswoman's patron, and a stern judge of arrogance all at once. In the quiet stillness of her myths, there is always a sense that things could have gone differently if only someone had thought more clearly, waited a little longer, or listened with greater care. Athena, in that sense, is the goddess of the almost invisible hinge on which events turn. She belongs to the pause before action, the pattern beneath motion, the calm intelligence that can hold a world together without ever needing to raise its voice. Athena's presence in the ancient world was never limited to battle, and one of the quietest places to understand her is at the loom. In Greek imagination, she was not only the goddess who mastered war strategy, but also the one who taught ordered skill, patient making, and the careful turning of raw material into something useful and beautiful. Many later writers describe her as a patron of weaving, spinning, and embroidery, and this was not a small domestic detail, but a deeply symbolic part of her identity. In the dim light of a house, where thread moved slowly between fingers, Athena's influence could be felt as a kind of disciplined intelligence. The loom itself became a sign of thought in motion, of structure, rhythm, and control. Some stories even suggest that she invented the first weaving tools, while others simply present her as the divine model of craft. In either case, the connection is unmistakable. Athene belonged to the world of making, but never in a careless way. Her arts required attention, restraint, and patience. That is one reason her presence could feel so comforting to the Greeks. She represented skill that did not rush, wisdom that could be repeated by hand, and a form of beauty that came from order rather than extravagance. And in a society where so much depended on household labor, textile production, and the slow work of women's hands, this aspect of Athene was as practical as it was sacred. From the loom, the old stories move naturally toward the strange and haunting tale of Arachne, one of the most famous myths connected with Athene. Arachne, a mortal weaver of extraordinary talent, was said to challenge the goddess herself, boasting that no one could surpass her skill. The story is often told as a warning about pride, but it also reveals how seriously the ancient world regarded art and expertise. Athene did not simply crush Arachne out of vanity. In many versions, she first appears in disguise, giving the young woman a chance to soften her arrogance. When the contest begins, both weave with breathtaking precision, though Arachne's work is often described as technically perfect and thematically daring. Athene's tapestry may show the glory of the gods and the proper limits of mortals, while Arachne's work exposes divine flaws and transformations, a more uncomfortable, more rebellious vision. The details vary from author to author, especially in later Roman retellings, but the emotional shape remains the same. Arachne's excellence cannot protect her from divine authority, and Athene's anger is both terrifying and strangely understandable within the mythic logic of the ancient world. Yet even here, the punishment is not merely destruction. Arachne is transformed into a spider, condemned to weave endlessly. The image lingers because it is so intimate, so delicate, and so melancholy. It suggests that weaving was not only labor, but fate. In this story, Athene's domain extends beyond craft into judgment, transformation, and the uneasy boundary between mortal accomplishment and divine power. If weaving reflects Athene's patient intelligence, then olive trees reflect her gift for civilization itself. One of the most enduring myths about her concerns the contest with Poseidon for the patronage of Athens. In the familiar version, the gods of the city ask each deity to offer a gift. Poseidon strikes the ground and produces either a saltwater spring or a warhorse, depending on the telling, while Athene offers the olive tree. Her gift is slower, quieter, and less dramatic at first glance, yet it proves far more useful to human life. The olive tree gave wood, oil, food, and shade. It became a symbol of peace, endurance, and prosperity. The Athenians chose Athene, and the city took her name. The exact historical layers of the myth are difficult to untangle because the story likely grew over time around older local traditions and civic identity. Still, it captures something essential about how the Greeks imagined her. Athene's wisdom was not flashy. It was practical and sustained. The olive tree does not grow quickly, and that may be part of why it suited her so well. It requires time, and it rewards care. Even the appearance of the tree in myth feels serene, rooted, and slightly sacred, as though it arrived with the promise of long seasons and patient survival. For the people of Athens, that gift was never just a symbol. Olive oil was central to cooking, medicine, bathing, trade, and ritual. So in Athene's tree, divine favor and daily life met almost seamlessly. Closely tied to this civic role is Athene's title as protector of cities, especially in her form as Athene Polias, the guardian of the polis. Unlike deities who rule from the distant wild or from the depths of the sea, Athene belonged to the organized life of the city. She stood for walls, assemblies, law institutions, and the delicate architecture of collective order. The ancient Athenians honored her as the deity who watched over the Acropolis and safeguarded the heart of their community. Her cult statue was not merely decorative, it was treated as a living presence within the sacred center of the city. During festivals, processions carried offerings to her, and her protection was sought in times of war, drought, and political uncertainty. The very idea of a city under Athene's care suggests a civilization that valued reason, planning, and the disciplined coordination of many lives. Yet her guardianship was never simple softness. She could defend fiercely, and her support implied responsibility. Cities under her protection were expected to be orderly and worthy of the favor they received. In a way, this makes Athene one of the most quietly modern of the Olympians. She belongs to public life, to administration, to structure, to the invisible systems that hold people together. And because of that, she was not only a goddess to pray to in crisis, but one to invoke in the long, calm labor of maintaining a stable world. As one moves deeper into Athens itself, the Parthenon becomes impossible to ignore, not only as architecture, but as a vast stone expression of Athene's significance. Built in the 5th century BCE on the Acropolis, this temple was dedicated to Athene Parthenos, Athene the Virgin, and it served as one of the greatest monuments of the classical world. The building's proportions, its columns, its slight curves and refinements, all show extraordinary attention to visual harmony. The Parthenon was not simply a house for a statue, it was a political and religious statement in marble. Inside stood the great chryselephantine image of Athene made by Phidias, a statue adorned with gold and ivory, reflecting both splendor and civic ambition. The temple also held treasures associated with the city, linking divine worship with the wealth and identity of Athens. Over centuries, scholars have debated the building's exact symbolic meanings, and there is no single explanation that captures all of them. It was a sanctuary, a treasury, a civic emblem, and a celebration of Athenian power after the Persian Wars. Perhaps that complexity is fitting. Athene herself was never narrow in significance. The Parthenon's weathered stones still suggest a strange stillness, even in ruins, as if the building continues to hold a memory of order, ceremony, and light. In the early morning, or beneath a soft sky, it is easy to imagine the temple as a place where the ancient city tried to align itself with something intelligent and enduring, something beyond the noise of ordinary politics. The great statue inside the Parthenon, Athene Parthenos, is one of the most famous lost images of antiquity. Though the original no longer survives, ancient descriptions and smaller copies allow us to imagine its appearance. Phidias' statue was said to be colossal, standing in a stately pose, armored yet composed, with a helmet, spear, shield, and a figure of victory in her hand. Gold and ivory made the goddess gleam in the temple's interior light, creating an effect that must have felt both awe-inspiring and slightly unreal. Ancient sources differ in details, and modern reconstructions can only approximate the original. But the basic impression is clear. Athene was presented here not as a distant abstraction, but as a radiant guardian whose very body embodied civic prestige. Her armor signified readiness, yet her expression and posture were likely calm rather than aggressive. That balance is so characteristic of her. Even in grandeur, she is not chaotic. The scale of the statue also reminds us how closely religion, art, and public identity were intertwined in classical Greece. A statue like this was not only an object of devotion, it was a statement about who the Athenians believed themselves to be and what kind of divine favor they hoped to deserve. The material richness of gold and ivory would have shimmered softly in the temple interior, perhaps catching the movement of lamps or reflected sunlight. One can imagine the silence around it, broken only by footsteps and ritual speech, as if the goddess were waiting within a crafted stillness. Athene's connection to craftsmanship appears again in another of her unusual associations, the production of armor and the protection of heroes. She was often depicted guiding the making and wearing of weapons, but always with a sense that technique mattered more than brute force. In myth, she is closely linked to heroes such as Perseus, Heracles, Odysseus, Jason, and Diomedes, though the strength of that relationship differs from story to story. She does not simply hand over weapons and step away. Rather, she advises, instructs, and steadies. A hero under Athene's care succeeds through intelligence, timing, and self-command. This is especially clear in the Odyssey, where she becomes a kind of divine strategist for Odysseus, helping him return home through disguise, patience, and carefully chosen action. The Greeks seem to have imagined that true military success required more than courage. It required metis, a form of crafty intelligence that Athene embodied at the highest level. This is one reason she could be both a war goddess and a goddess of peaceful arts without contradiction. Armor was not an end in itself. It was one more crafted object, a protective shell shaped by human skill and divine wisdom. In the quiet world of sleep-friendly storytelling, this detail is comforting in its own way. Athene's weapons are not noisy symbols of destruction. They are instruments of discernment, tools meant to preserve the right order of things. One of the most fascinating features of Athene is her extraordinary relationship with birth and origin, which is often described through the image of her emerging fully grown from Zeus's head. The myth is dramatic, but its deeper symbolic meaning is subtle. Athene does not pass through the ordinary cycle of birth and infancy. She arrives complete, armored, and aware, as if wisdom itself had no need to grow in stages. The story varies across ancient sources, with some emphasizing that Zeus swallowed Metis, the goddess of intelligence and counsel, before Athene was born. In that telling, Athene becomes the visible result of divine thought internalized and transformed. Her emergence from the head suggests that intellect, judgment, and clear sight are central to her identity. She is a daughter of mind before she is anything else. The myth also helps explain why she stands apart from many other gods and goddesses. There is something unusual, even untouchable, about a deity who arrives already formed. Yet the image is not cold. It can be read as a celebration of clarity, of ideas that appear suddenly after long hidden labor. A finished plan, a solved problem, a thought that rises fully shaped into awareness. These experiences can feel almost divine, and perhaps that is why the myth endured. The ancient imagination translated mental brilliance into bodily drama, giving Athene a birth that looked impossible precisely because it suggested the mystery of intelligence itself. Athene's virginity, so often emphasized in her epithets and cult titles, is another aspect that invites careful thought rather than quick interpretation. The term Parthenos, often translated as virgin, refers in her case not only to sexual untouchedness, but also to independence, autonomy, and a refusal to be contained by the domestic roles expected of many other female figures in myth. This does not mean Athene is disconnected from women's labor or concerns. On the contrary, she is deeply linked to weaving, household order, and practical wisdom, but she is not defined by marriage, romance, or maternity. That sets her apart from goddesses such as Hera, Demeter, or Aphrodite, each of whom expresses powerful aspects of relationship, fertility, or desire. Athene stands elsewhere, near the threshold of public and private life, aligned with integrity and self-possession. Ancient worship of Athene Parthenos in Athens gave this quality monumental expression, and later traditions continue to treat her as an emblem of chastity and incorruptibility. At the same time, scholars have long noted that virgin in the ancient world did not always carry exactly the same cultural meanings it does now. In Athene's case, the title seems to preserve a sense of inviolate strength, a wholeness that resists possession. She belongs to no one in the ordinary human sense, and yet she remains deeply involved in the fate of cities and heroes. That tension gives her something serene and untouchable, like a bright star seen from far away. Even Athene's animals reflect her unusual balance of wisdom and watchfulness, especially the owl, which became one of her most enduring symbols. The owl is a creature of night, silent and observant, able to see when others cannot. In Athens, the bird appeared on coins and in artistic depictions, often perched beside the goddess or represented on its own as a sign of her presence. The association is simple enough at first glance, but it is also rich with atmosphere. The owl does not announce itself with noise. It waits, watches, and turns its head with measured curiosity. That image suits Athene beautifully. The owl became, in a sense, a visual shorthand for insight and discernment. Some ancient explanations connected the bird to the brightness of Athene's eyes, while later writers built symbolic links between the bird's nocturnal sight and the goddess's mental clarity. The famous Owl of Athene still lingers in modern language as a symbol of wisdom, but in the ancient world it carried more than that. It pointed to the idea that knowledge is not always loud or immediate. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the dark, with the patience to see what others miss. The bird's appearance in art and coinage would have been familiar to Athenians in daily life, a small reminder that the city's divine patron was never far away. In that tiny image, practical life, sacred identity, and the soft mystery of night all seem to meet. Finally, Athene's presence in festivals shows how fully she belonged to the rhythm of the year and the shared life of the city. The greatest of these was the Panathenaea, a festival celebrated in Athens with processions, sacrifices, athletic contests, musical performances, and the offering of a woven peplos or robe to the goddess. The festival was not only religious but civic, drawing the entire community into a shared display of devotion and identity. The peplos itself was especially significant because it connected Athene's virginity, her weaving patronage, and her role as protector of the city. The robe was often elaborately decorated, sometimes with scenes of divine struggle, and it was carried in solemn procession to the Acropolis. Different forms of the Panathenaea existed over time, and the grander version, the Great Panathenaea, included more elaborate competitions and wider participation. What remains consistent is the sense of careful collective order. This was a festival of movement, music, and public ceremony, but also of measured dignity. It reflected Athene's character almost perfectly, disciplined, artistic, communal, and bright with purpose. For the Athenians, honoring her was not a matter of one isolated ritual. It was a way of renewing the city's bond with its own ideals. And in the long, gentle pacing of that festival, one can almost hear the quiet rustle of fabric, the murmur of crowds, and the steady feeling that wisdom, when shared, can become a kind of peace. Athene's connection to weaving was so deep that in many Greek households she was imagined not simply as a distant goddess, but as a guiding intelligence behind the quiet order of domestic craft. Looms were part of everyday life, yet in myth they became something more than tools. They were places where patience, skill, and memory were pulled into thread. Athene stood over that patient work, and the ancient imagination seems to have felt that this was fitting. Weaving required precision, restraint, and the ability to turn raw material into pattern, all qualities the Greeks often associated with her. In some stories, women who excelled at the loom were said to work under her special attention, though not always safely, because Athene's favor could be generous and exacting at the same time. The tale of Arachne preserves this tension in memorable form. A mortal weaver, proud of her own excellence, challenged Athene and was transformed in punishment, yet the story also quietly honors the craft itself. The spider's web becomes a kind of lingering echo of textile art, a delicate structure repeated endlessly in nature. In older Greek settings, where spinning and weaving shaped the rhythm of the household, Athene may have felt especially present in the evening hush, when lamps burned low and fingers continued to move thread through the dark. Her association with weaving was never merely symbolic. It was woven into daily life, into economy, status, skill, and the sacred dignity of making. Closely related to weaving was Athene's role as a protector of work that demanded intelligence rather than brute force. She was not the goddess of a wild and untamed world, but of disciplined effort, the kind that organized a city and gave shape to human life. This may be one reason so many crafts, from carpentry to metalworking, gathered under her wider influence. Ancient writers sometimes presented her as a patron of artisans, especially those whose labor required foresight. A ship, for example, was not just timber joined together. It was an idea made physical, a structure that depended on planning and balance. A chariot, a temple roof, a well-proportioned bronze object all needed the kind of exact judgment Athene represented. The Greeks did not always sharply separate inspiration from technique, and Athene could stand for both at once. In a world where so much depended on manual skill, she embodied the calm intelligence that kept hands steady. Even later traditions, when describing refined workmanship, often reached for her name as a shorthand for excellence. One can imagine how useful such a goddess must have been to a culture that admired practical beauty, where the best object was not only useful, but also measured, harmonious, and durable. Through her, craft became a form of thought. As the protector of the city, Athene was inseparable from the idea of Athens itself, and this bond became one of the most famous in all of antiquity. The city took her name, or perhaps she took hers from the city, depending on the old tradition one follows, and that uncertainty itself is part of the mythic landscape. The Athenians imagined that their goddess had chosen their land in a contest with Poseidon, offering an olive tree where he offered salt water or a horse, depending on the version preserved. The olive tree was a quiet, enduring gift. It promised food, oil, shade, and trade. It did not roar and it did not surge, but it lasted. That difference may have mattered greatly to the Athenians, who saw in Athene a symbol of stable civic life rather than violent power. Her presence on the Acropolis was not merely decorative. It was political, religious, and deeply local. The Parthenon, the great temple that came to embody her, was both a shrine and a statement about what the city valued: order, intelligence, and a kind of disciplined grandeur. Festivals such as the Panathenea brought the community together in her honor, with processions, offerings, music, and contests that reminded the city of its shared identity. In this way, Athene became more than a goddess of one place. She became the spirit of a civic ideal, standing watch over the slow, careful life of the polis. The olive tree that marked Athene's gift to Athens was not only a mythic token, it also reflected the real material importance of the olive in the ancient Mediterranean world. Olive oil was food, medicine, fuel, perfume base, and ritual substance. It soothed skin, lit lamps, anointed athletes, and fed households. So when Athene was linked to the olive, she was linked to a resource that touched nearly every part of life. In one sense, this made her a goddess of practical abundance. In another, it gave her a deeply peaceful association. Olive trees grow slowly. They endure drought, pruning, and age. Their trunk twists and thickens over time, carrying the look of patience itself. Ancient audiences would have recognized that their goddess's tree was no showy or explosive plant. It was steady, rooted, and useful in many seasons. Some sacred olive trees in Athens were treated with unusual respect, and later writers describe them as surviving across generations, protected by law and reverence. This made the plant a living symbol of continuity, of a city remembering its own foundations. In the low light of evening, when oil lamps flickered in homes and sanctuaries, Athene's gift may have seemed to glow softly everywhere at once. The olive connected her to nourishment, settlement, and the quiet persistence that allows civilization to endure. Athene's famous helmet and spear often make her seem severe at first glance, yet in Greek art these features can also suggest readiness rather than aggression. She is rarely depicted in the frenzy of battle. Instead, she appears composed, upright, and alert, a figure who has already assessed the situation. Her armor marks her as a goddess who can enter conflict without being consumed by it. This distinction mattered in ancient thought. War was not one thing to the Greeks. There was chaotic violence embodied in other figures, and there was strategic warfare, the measured planning of campaigns and defense of cities. Athene belonged to the second category. Her helmet did not merely promise destruction, it signaled discernment. Her shield, too, especially when bearing the Gorgon's head, combined terror with protection. The image could frighten enemies, but for the people under her care it became a kind of warding sign, a reminder that wisdom could stand between a city and danger. In sculpted forms, her armor has a curious stillness. The metal surfaces, if imagined in candlelight, seem less like instruments of noise than like expressions of contained force. Athene's martial character was therefore never simple. She did not love war for its own sake. She represented the intelligence that knows how to defend, how to endure, and how to prevail without losing clarity. Her relationship to heroes reveals another dimension of her nature. Athene often acts not as a distant monarch of the heavens, but as a helper who gives counsel at crucial moments. Odysseus is perhaps the most famous of these favored mortals. She aids him not by replacing his effort, but by sharpening it. She masks, guides, transforms, and advises. He remains clever, but her support makes his cleverness survivable in a world full of danger. Perseus also receives help from her in the hunt for Medusa, and Heracles, in some traditions, benefits from her guidance. What is striking in these stories is that Athene's assistance tends to be practical. She does not solve everything for the hero. She lends a tool, a plan, a disguise, a moment of insight. This makes her companionship feel almost scholarly, as though she were the goddess of usable wisdom rather than abstract wisdom. Ancient listeners may have found comfort in that. To be human in heroic times was to depend on timing, judgment, and a little divine favor. Athene's presence suggested that thought itself could be protective. In many narratives she appears at the edge of confusion, bringing clarity like a lamp carried into a darkened room. Her aid is often quiet, but it changes the direction of events. One of the more fascinating aspects of Athene is that she is strongly associated with rational thought, yet she remains fully mythic and sacred. Later ages sometimes treated wisdom as something detached, almost dry, but Athene shows that intelligence in the ancient world could be personified, honored, and woven into ritual life. She was not simply a metaphor for logic. She was a living divine power who could bless counsels, safeguard judgment, and inspire eloquence. In Athens especially, public speech mattered. Courts, assemblies, and civic debate all required the ability to persuade and to think clearly in front of others. Athene's presence over such institutions makes sense because the Greek city-state depended on argument as much as on force. Even so, her wisdom was not cold. The myths around her suggest a mind that is attentive, responsive, and deeply practical. She can be stern, certainly, and often her justice is exact, but the ideal she represents is not remote abstraction. It is the capacity to see consequences, to discriminate between paths, and to choose the one that leads toward order rather than ruin. In this way, she stands at the border between the divine and the civic, between the shining height of Olympus and the everyday need to think well. That boundary gives her a particular calm authority. There is also a gentler side to Athene in her connections with protection and household order. Though less obvious than her martial image, this aspect appears whenever she oversees the things that keep life stable: weaving, tools, domestic craft, food production, and the memory of proper forms. In some regions and traditions, she could be invoked as a guardian of thresholds, a presence that helped keep disorder outside. The Greeks did not always separate the great from the small in religion. A goddess who watched over a city could also be felt in the corner of a home, in the quiet work done before sleep, in the steady arrangement of objects that makes a room restful. Athene's intelligence was therefore not only for generals and statesmen, it was also for anyone trying to maintain balance in a human life. This may explain why she remained so widely beloved. She offered not ecstasy or abandonment, but steadiness. Her gift was order, and order in the ancient world was not an enemy of beauty. Quite the opposite. The beautiful vase, the well-cut stone, the neatly woven cloth, The properly kept household all testify to a world shaped by patient intelligence. Athene, more than many gods, seems to have inhabited that quiet domain where usefulness and grace meet. Her birth story, too, retains an aura of strangeness that helped define her distinctive place among the gods. She emerges from Zeus, fully armed without passing through ordinary birth. Ancient audiences likely found in this a symbol of exceptional force joined with intellect. It is as if thought itself burst forth ready for action. The image is startling, but it also reflects a larger pattern in her mythology. Athene often appears complete, finished, and already authoritative. Unlike deities whose stories emphasize infancy, growth, or vulnerability, she enters the world in a form of instant maturity. That may be why she so often seems unsentimental. Yet this lack of ordinary childhood does not make her cold. It makes her elemental. She belongs to a world where mind and action arrive together. The extraordinary nature of her birth also links her to Zeus in a special way. She is his favored child, one who shares in his authority while remaining distinct. This relationship may have helped ancient storytellers explain why she can act independently in myth, yet still remain loyal to the cosmic order. There is something almost luminous about the idea, a goddess of thought and skill, brought forth in full armor from the head of a sky god, like the sudden appearance of understanding itself. Even the rituals and epithets attached to Athene reveal how many roles she could hold at once. She was called by names that pointed to wisdom, military protection, city guardianship, craft, and purity. Such titles were not mere ornament. They shaped how worshippers understood her presence in different places. In one sanctuary, she might be approached as a protector of the city, in another, as a power overseeing a local craft or community tradition. Ancient religion was flexible in this way, allowing one god to carry many overlapping meanings without collapsing them into a single definition. Athene's epithets therefore read almost like facets of a gem, each catching light from a different direction. This is perhaps one reason she remained so enduring in the Greek imagination. She was not reduced to one story or one function. She could be stern guardian, patron of practical skill, symbol of civic pride and companion to heroes, all without losing coherence. For listeners in antiquity, and perhaps for us now, that complexity may be part of her soothing power. She suggests that intelligence need not be narrow, that protection can be graceful, and that strength can exist without noise. In the stillness before sleep, Athene's many faces seem to settle together into one calm presence, watchful and composed, like a lamp left burning in a carefully ordered room. Athene's presence in Greek life was never limited to one role or one symbol, and that flexibility is part of what made her so enduring. She could be the armed guardian on a city's highest hill, but she could also be the quiet intelligence behind a household's order, a loom's careful pattern, or a law court's measured argument. In many ways, she belonged to the spaces where civilization tries to become deliberate. The Greeks imagined her not as a force of raw impulse, but as a divinity of thought guided into action. That is one reason her worship spread so naturally through the life of the city. A farmer might pray for weather, a sailor for safe passage, but a legislator, a craftsman, or a young woman learning domestic skill could all look to Athene in a different, more intimate way. She was not distant in the same manner as a god of the far sea or the hidden underworld. She was close to the work of making a human world. And because of that, her image could shift while still remaining unmistakably hers, whether carved in marble, painted on a vase, or carried in the mind as the calm, watchful goddess standing just beyond a door. In Athens, her connection to the city was so deep that the city itself seemed almost to grow around her name. Ancient tradition remembered the contest in which Athene and Poseidon vied for patronage of the settlement, each offering a gift, with the olive tree said to be Athene's winning offering. The story is familiar, but scholars have long noted that such myths are often less about literal events than about a community explaining why it belongs to a particular divine order. The olive was not only useful, but quietly transformative. It gave oil, food, light, and a sense of permanence in a landscape where survival demanded patience. That makes the myth feel especially apt. Athene was never merely a goddess of war. She was also associated with the deep continuity of civilization, with things that endure, ripen, and serve many purposes at once. Even the olive tree itself seems to reflect her character because it does not impress in a sudden burst. It grows steadily with an older kind of beauty. Its trunk can twist and knot, its leaves silver green in the wind, and yet it remains reliable. In that way, the tree became a living emblem of the goddess's practical wisdom and of the city's own wish to see itself as wise, orderly, and protected. One of the most famous expressions of Athene's presence in Greek art is her helmet, and the feeling it creates is distinctive. Unlike the aggressive chaos of some battle imagery, Athene's helmet often appears controlled, ceremonial, and composed. It does not suggest fury so much as readiness. When artists placed her in armor, they were not stripping away femininity, as modern viewers sometimes assume. Rather, they were showing that intelligence itself could be formidable, and that authority need not be allowed to be effective. Her spear, too, was rarely shown in a frenzy of motion. It belonged to the poised moment before action, the instant when thought has already chosen its course. In some images, she carries the aegis, that protective goatskin or cloak associated with divine power, sometimes marked by the terrifying Gorgon's head. The combination is striking: wisdom joined to intimidation, protection linked with warning. Athene's visual language balances calm and danger in a way that feels almost paradoxical. She is the goddess who can terrify enemies, but among her own people she represents measure, mastery, and a mind that knows how not to waste force. There is something deeply restful in that kind of power, because it does not need to prove itself by constant display. The Parthenon, rising on the Athenian Acropolis, remains one of the clearest architectural expressions of her importance. Even in ruin, it carries an atmosphere of astonishing quiet dignity. Built in the 5th century BCE, it was not simply a temple in the ordinary sense, but a monumental statement about the city's identity, wealth, and confidence. Its sculptural decoration once surrounded worshippers with scenes that connected Athene to myth, civic pride, and divine presence. Some parts of the building's program are still debated by historians, and that uncertainty gives the monument a kind of scholarly hush. We can see enough to understand its grandeur, but not enough to feel entirely certain of every meaning the ancient Athenians assigned to it. That ambiguity can be strangely fitting for Athene herself. She is a goddess of clarity, but also of hidden strategy. The Parthenon's marble surfaces would have glowed warmly in the sun, while its proportions created an effect of controlled harmony. It was not meant to overwhelm by excess. It was meant to feel inevitable, as though wisdom itself had taken architectural form. Standing there, one can imagine the soft movement of light across the columns and the distant city below, all of it held together by a single reverent idea, that Athene belonged not only in myth, but in the very structure of civic life. Her relationship to craftsmanship is another part of her identity that deserves lingering attention. Athene was patron of skilled work, especially weaving, an art that required patience, precision, and the ability to imagine the whole pattern before it fully emerged. The loom is a quiet machine, if machine is even the right word for such an ancient and human instrument. It transforms thread into cloth through rhythm and discipline, one crossing at a time. In myths, Athene is often associated with women's technical knowledge, though that term can sound too modern and too narrow for the richness of the ancient world. She presides over making, over the intelligent ordering of raw material into something useful and beautiful. This is why the contest with Arachne matters so much in Greek imagination. It is not just a tale about punishment or pride. It is a story about artistry, skill, and the dangerous edge where human achievement begins to challenge divine authority. Athene's mastery is not threatened by the existence of craft. Rather, she embodies the highest form of it. She understands that making is not merely decorative, it is a form of knowledge. Every woven cloth, every shaped vessel, every carefully fitted object suggests a mind behind it, and Athene is the patron of that mind. At the same time, the goddess's wisdom was often described as strategic rather than emotional, and this distinction helps explain why she appears so often in stories of heroes. She does not usually save them by direct force alone. Instead, she advises, guides, disguises, or clarifies. In the Odyssey, for instance, her role is woven through the poem like a steady thread. She is there in the journeys, the recognitions, the delayed returns, and the careful restoration of order. Odysseus himself is often admired not only for endurance, but for cunning, and that quality places him in her orbit. Athene values intelligence that can adapt to circumstances without losing its purpose. She likes plans that are patient. She approves of cleverness when it serves a larger good, though the line between admirable intelligence and dangerous trickery is sometimes delicate. Ancient audiences would have felt that tension strongly. To them, wisdom was not merely information. It was the ability to judge timing, character, and consequence. Athene's influence in heroic stories often feels like a calm hand on the shoulder, encouraging the hero to wait, to think, and to act only when the moment is ripe. That kind of divine assistance is easy to miss if one expects spectacle. But in epic poetry, as in life, the quiet counsel can be the most powerful. It is also worth remembering that Athene could be deeply protective of her chosen cities and devastating toward those who threatened them. Her famous role as defender of Athens is only one example of a broader pattern. She is frequently invoked as a guardian of walls, gates, and strategic strongholds. Ancient Greeks living in a world of competing city-states understood that security was never abstract. A wall was a line between order and ruin, and a goddess who understood defense was more than symbolic. She represented the intelligence needed to preserve a fragile human settlement. This is why she can seem both martial and domestic, both public and intimate. The same goddess who watches over the battlefield also watches over the threshold of the home. There is a subtle continuity between these spaces. Both require vigilance, both depend on boundaries, and both can be lost if neglected. Athene's protection was therefore not passive shelter, but intelligent guardianship. She did not simply stand beside a city like a stone statue. She was imagined as the force that made the city capable of remaining itself. That idea would have mattered greatly in antiquity, when memory, law, and civic identity were all under pressure from war, migration, and time. Her image in later thought, especially in the Roman world as Minerva, continued to preserve this blend of wisdom, craft, and authority. Yet even before Roman reinterpretation, Athene was already a goddess whose meanings crossed social levels. Elite poets, public officials, potters, ordinary worshippers, and local communities could all approach her through different needs. A young person might see in her the promise of disciplined learning. A city might see in her the seal of legitimacy. A craftsperson might feel her presence in the precision of the hand. These overlapping meanings made her unusually adaptable. She could remain stable without becoming narrow. In modern terms, one might say she functioned as a symbol of intelligence that is embodied, practical, and communal rather than solitary. That may be one reason her story continues to feel fresh. She is not wisdom floating above the world in some remote abstraction. She is wisdom at work in stone, thread, counsel, and strategy. Even her silence can feel active, as though she is observing more than speaking, waiting for the correct moment to intervene. This quality makes her especially soothing to contemplate, because it suggests that clarity does not always need noise. Sometimes the most powerful mind is the one that knows how to remain still. Among the many myths surrounding Athene, her birth is perhaps the strangest and most vivid. She is said to have emerged fully grown from the head of Zeus, already armed and radiant. The image is startling. almost dreamlike, and it has inspired centuries of interpretation. Some ancient traditions connect the story to Zeus's need to avoid being overthrown by offspring. Others see it as a symbolic expression of intellect arising directly from divine authority. Whatever the original meaning, the scene itself is unforgettable. Unlike mortal birth, which is hidden, gradual, and bodily, Athene's arrival is sudden and complete. She comes into the world not as a child, but as an embodied idea, a mind made visible. Yet the violence of the myth should not obscure its brilliance. The head is the seat of thought, and Athene's emergence from Zeus's head suggests that wisdom is not separate from sovereignty, but essential to it. In later art, the dramatic moment of her birth could be rendered with astonishing energy, while still preserving her composure. Even newborn, she is not helpless. She is already herself. There is something almost comforting in that image, because it offers a vision of strength that does not require dependency in the usual sense. Athene arrives as if she has always been ready. Her connection with animals, especially the owl, gave her another layer of symbolic depth. The owl's large eyes and quiet nocturnal habits made it a natural emblem of watchfulness and insight. In ancient Athens, owls appeared on coinage and in artistic motifs, linking the city's identity to the goddess's presence. Their association may partly reflect the bird's ability to see in the dark, a fitting metaphor for discernment in uncertain conditions. Wisdom, after all, is often the power to perceive what is not immediately obvious, but the owl also contributes to Athene's atmosphere of stillness. It is a creature of silence, of measured movements, of alertness without panic. Ancient observers might have heard its call in the night air and felt a mixture of unease and reverence. That ambivalence suits the goddess well. Athene is not warm in the manner of a hearth deity, nor wild in the manner of a nature spirit. She is serene but formidable. The owl, perched in shadow, captures that equilibrium. And because the bird moves between light and darkness, it mirrors the goddess's ability to guide people through difficult knowledge, the kind that requires patience to understand and courage to accept. Even the rituals associated with Athene reveal how closely she was woven into daily life. Festivals in her honor were not only solemn religious acts, but also communal occasions in which athletic competition, procession, offering, and identity all met. The Panathenaea especially stood as one of the great festivals of Athens, and it brought together citizens in a shared expression of belonging. A woven peplos or robe was presented to the goddess, emphasizing once again her association with textile work and civic order. The festival would have been a dense sensory experience. The movement of crowds, the rhythm of music, the scent of sacrifice, the bright cloth, the carved altars, the heat of the day settling over stone. Yet beneath all that activity was a structured sense of harmony. Athene's worship did not encourage chaos. It organized it. It gave form to public joy and public memory. And because ritual in the ancient world was deeply embodied, one can imagine how these ceremonies tied the city together not only through belief, but through repeated action. In such moments, Athene was not simply represented, she was enacted. The city performed its own continuity before her image, and in doing so affirmed that wisdom, craft, and protection were not separate virtues, but parts of the same enduring life. In the end, what makes Athene so compelling is that she remains both sharply defined and wonderfully broad. She can be the virgin goddess in armor, but she can also be the patient teacher, the guardian of craft, the city's rational soul, the owl-eyed watcher, and the one who turns thought into action. Ancient writers and artists did not always agree on every detail of her character, and that uncertainty has not diminished her. If anything, it has made her feel more alive, because a deity of intelligence ought to admit complexity. Athene is rarely a figure of excess. She is balanced, lucid, and exacting, yet she is not cold. Her order has warmth in it, like the steady light of oil in a lamp, or the gentle weight of a woven cloth held at the shoulders. She belongs to the human desire to build something lasting out of skill and judgment. And when one lingers with her long enough, she seems less like a distant myth than a calm presence at the edge of thought, keeping watch while the city and the mind grow quiet. Among Athene's many sacred symbols, the owl became one of the most enduring. In the dim light of ancient Athens, the little bird's large eyes and quiet flight seemed to echo the goddess herself, watchful, calm, and difficult to surprise. The Greeks called the owl glaucopes, a word also linked to Athene's own bright-eyed appearance, suggesting a shared quality of keen sight. On coins from Athens, especially the famous silver tetradrachms, the owl appears beside the goddess as if to announce the city's wisdom in miniature. There is something almost restful about that image, a still bird, a steady gaze, a promise that understanding can be patient rather than loud. Later generations often imagined owls as symbols of learning, but in Athens they were already tied to practical survival, to seeing clearly in uncertain darkness. Scholars still debate how much of that association came from older myths and how much from the natural presence of owls around the Acropolis, yet the bond became so strong that the bird could stand in for Athene herself. Even now, the image feels quiet and enduring, like a lamp kept burning in a corner room through the night. Athene's connection to weaving may be one of the most intimate aspects of her character. In myth, she is not only a warrior and planner, but also a patron of skilled hands, patient labor, and ordered beauty. The loom belongs to the domestic world, yet under her protection it becomes something almost intellectual, a place where pattern, memory, and technique meet. Greek women wove clothing, hangings, and ceremonial textiles in daily life, but myths often elevate weaving into a contest of intelligence. The most famous of these is the story of Arachne, whose extraordinary skill provoked Athene's attention and, in some versions, her anger. The tale can sound severe, yet it also reveals how deeply the Greeks respected craft. Weaving required concentration, rhythm, and foresight. One small mistake could unravel the whole design. In that sense, the loom resembles Athene's mind itself, where many threads of thought are held together without confusion. Ancient viewers may have admired the goddess not simply because she knew battle or politics, but because she understood the discipline behind beauty. The soft scrape of wool against wood, the measured rising and lowering of the shuttle, all of it belonged to a world that Athene could inhabit as naturally as the battlefield. And perhaps that is why she remains so interesting. She did not rule only the dramatic or the grand, but also the repetitive and the careful, the kind of work that settles the spirit. One of the oldest and most mysterious images linked with Athene is the aegis, her protective cloak or breastplate, often described as fringed with snakes and bearing the head of the Gorgon. In art, it appears as a powerful emblem of divine authority, but its exact origin is not entirely clear. Some scholars think the aegis may have begun as a goatskin garment used in ritual or battle, later transformed into a supernatural object through mythic imagination. Others see echoes of older Near Eastern protective symbols, where animal skin, fringe, and terrifying faces were used to ward off harm. Whatever its earliest form, the aegis came to mean safety through awe. Athene's shield was not merely decorative. It could unnerve enemies, inspire courage, and declare that an order greater than human fear was present. Ancient poets often describe her carrying it in moments of decisive intervention, as if a brief flash of divine force could alter the course of events. There is something almost soothing in the idea that protection need not always be gentle to be effective. Sometimes defense is stern, even frightening, yet it serves a deeper calm. The aegis belongs to that paradox. It is hard and brilliant, unsettling and secure, like thunder heard from a safe distance. In a world of uncertainty, Athene's shield offered not invulnerability, perhaps, but a boundary between chaos and the space where thought and civilization might continue. Athene's birth is among the most dramatic stories in Greek mythology, but it is also one of the strangest in its imagery. According to the familiar version, Zeus swallowed Metis, the goddess of wisdom, and later experienced such unbearable pain in his head that Hephaestus or another divine smith split open his skull. Athene then emerged fully grown and armored, a startling birth that places wisdom directly out of the mind of heaven. The tale has invited centuries of interpretation. Some see it as a symbolic statement about intelligence arising from thought rather than from physical struggle. Others point to older, possibly pre-Greek layers of myth in which a powerful female deity was absorbed into a patriarchal divine order. There is no single certainty here, only the sense that the story was important because it dramatized Athene's unique position. She does not pass through childhood in myth, she appears already complete, as if she had always existed in mature form. That detail gives her an unusual stillness. She is not portrayed as impulsive or newly formed, but as something established and balanced from the start. The image of her emergence can feel almost like a dawn inside the mind, a sudden but quiet clarity after pressure and darkness. Ancient storytellers may have loved the spectacle, yet the deeper meaning seems peaceful. Wisdom arrives not as noise, but as revelation. In Athens, the Panathenaic festival became one of the city's most important public celebrations, and it centered on Athene in a particularly civic way. Unlike some religious festivals that focused mainly on sacrifice or mystery, the Panathenaea joined devotion, athletics, music, and public identity into a single grand occasion. Every year the city honored the goddess, and every fourth year the celebration grew even more elaborate. A procession wound through Athens toward the Acropolis, carrying a finely woven peplos, a robe made for Athene's ancient wooden image. The fabric itself was a work of art, often decorated with scenes of the Gigantomachy, the battle between gods and giants, reminding spectators that divine order triumphs over disorder. The festival also included contests in running, wrestling, chariot racing, and recitation, so that physical skill and artistic excellence stood beside worship. In this way, Athene was not remote from daily civic life, she was the spirit of it. She belonged to the city as a guardian of institutions, but also as a kind of shared ideal. The rhythm of marching feet, the shimmer of woven cloth, the smell of offerings, and the music of praise would have filled the streets with a sense of collective belonging. Even now, one can imagine the procession moving slowly upward in the sunlight, not hurried, but deliberate, as if the city itself were breathing in unison. Among Athene's many epithets, Pallas has remained one of the most enigmatic. In ancient sources, Athene is often called Pallas Athene, but the origin of the name was already obscure to later writers. Some ancient explanations link it to a companion named Pallas, who may have been a female friend or rival of the goddess, while others derive it from a word associated with brandishing a spear. Because the myths vary so widely, the name invites caution. It may preserve an older tradition that was no longer fully understood even in classical times. What matters is that the title became deeply attached to Athene's identity, appearing in poetry, inscriptions, and formal worship. Its sound has a softness to it, almost unexpectedly gentle for a warrior goddess, and that softness suits her peculiar nature. Athene is not a deity of wild frenzy. Even in combat, she represents strategy, discipline, and measure. The name Pallas may therefore feel like a linguistic echo of that restrained strength. Ancient epics use it with great familiarity, as though it contains layers of memory no longer visible on the surface. In the quiet after reading such texts, one can almost feel how names in the ancient world were not just labels, but vessels of tradition. Pallas Athene is both familiar and distant, intimate and ancient, as if her very title carries the faint rustle of older stories folded within it. Athene's involvement in the building of ships, houses, and tools reveals another side of her power. She is a goddess of practical intelligence. Greek myths often link her with crafts that require exact measurement and thoughtful design. The ship Argo, for example, is said in some traditions to have been built with Athene's help. and the hero Odysseus benefits repeatedly from her clever interventions in travel and return. This connection makes sense in a culture where survival depended on skillful construction and reliable planning. A ship had to be balanced correctly, a roof had to shelter from the elements, a plough had to cut true. Athene's wisdom is therefore not abstract only. It touches the grain of wood, the arc of a curved hull, the fit of joints and seams. She stands for the intelligence that transforms raw matter into something usable and enduring. In a modern world that often separates thought from craft, this ancient association feels especially soothing. It suggests that wisdom is not merely contemplation in solitude, but the ability to make things hold together. The Greek imagination, in attributing such work to Athene, understood that civilization depends on invisible expertise. The sound of a plane smoothing timber, the patient fastening of a beam, the calm attention of a builder checking alignment, these are small acts of order. Under Athene's patronage, they become almost sacred. The city of Athens itself took its name from Athene, and that naming was not merely a matter of convenience. In myth, the contest between Athene and Poseidon for the patronage of the city marked a foundational moment. Poseidon offered a salt spring, or in some versions a horse. Athene offered the olive tree. The citizens chose her gift and the city became hers. The story captures a striking contrast between force and nourishment. Poseidon's offering, dramatic and powerful, speaks of motion, sea and conquest. Athene's gift is quieter, slower growing and more useful over time. The olive tree provided wood, oil, food and shade, and it became a lasting emblem of peace and prosperity. In that sense, the myth reflects a civilization's preference for sustainability over spectacle. Yet the story is also more complex than a simple victory of one deity over another. Greek religion often preserved multiple layers of value, and Poseidon remained important in Athens as well. Still, the olive tree stood as a symbol of what the city wished to be: rooted, cultivated, and intellectually refined. The soft silver leaves of an olive grove shimmer differently from the violent spray of the sea. Ancient Athenians would have known that difference in their bodies. Athene's gift did not remove struggle from life, but it offered a way to imagine abundance through patience. Even the tree itself seems to embody a quiet endurance, growing slowly yet living long, a fitting emblem for a goddess who prized steady wisdom. Athene's relationship with heroes is often one of guidance rather than domination, and that distinction matters. She assists figures like Perseus, Odysseus, Heracles in some traditions, and especially the craftsmen and tacticians who need more than brute strength. Her help often takes the form of a plan, a disguise, a timely warning, or a clever tool. In the story of Perseus, she provides a reflective shield that helps him avoid the direct sight of Medusa, allowing him to act with precision. In the Odyssey, she repeatedly supports Odysseus not by solving everything for him, but by strengthening his intelligence and adaptability. This makes Athene feel unusually humane for a goddess. She does not erase difficulty, she helps mortals meet it with clearer minds. Her presence in these tales can seem almost like that of a wise counselor who speaks only when necessary. Ancient audiences may have admired this restraint, since it reflects a social ideal in which good judgment was more valuable than impulsive force. The heroes she aids are often at their best when they combine courage with thought, and Athene, more than any other deity, embodies that union. There is a calmness in the way she enters these narratives. She is not a storm, but a clearing in the storm, a place where a person can see the path ahead. Even Athene's more severe side seems to arise from order rather than chaos. In myths where she punishes or transforms, the underlying logic often involves disrespect, hubris, or a misuse of skill. The story of Arachne is the clearest example, but there are others in which those who trespass against sacred boundaries suffer her response. Modern readers sometimes find these episodes unsettling, yet they reflect an ancient understanding that excellence carries obligations. Skill without reverence could become dangerous, and intelligence without humility could unravel community. Athene's sternness, therefore, belongs to her role as guardian of standards. She is not a deity of indulgence, but of measure. In a world where craft and knowledge mattered deeply, this role would have been recognizable and perhaps even comforting. Standards create shape, shape creates stability. The ancient Greeks often imagined divine justice not as abstract law alone, but as the preservation of proportion in human affairs. Athene's punishments, however harsh they may appear, are bound to that principle. She does not act wildly. She restores balance in the way a weaver corrects a broken thread before the pattern fails. The image is not cheerful exactly, but it is orderly. And in its own austere way, order can be restful. It tells the mind that the world still has structure, even when human beings forget it. In later art and literature, Athene often became the embodiment of serene intellect, yet her ancient worship was more varied and grounded than that image alone suggests. She was invoked in matters of war, yes, but also in courts, workshops, and city planning. She presided over the practical side of culture, the everyday intelligence that shapes collective life. This broad reach may be why she has endured so well in memory. Unlike deities tied to a single emotion or season, Athene can appear wherever judgment, skill, and patience are needed. Her presence is often imagined in marble and bronze, in the quiet gleam of helmets, in the straight lines of temples and tools, in the measured confidence of a person who has thought before acting. Some of the oldest temples dedicated to her, including the remains on the Acropolis, remind us that worship was not an abstract concept, but a physical environment. Stone pillars, open-air offerings, and footsteps all formed part of the experience. Standing in such a place, one might have felt the passage from noise into composure. That feeling seems fitting for Athene. She belongs to the transition from disorder to design, from scattered motion to purposeful form. And in that transition, there is a deep kind of calm, the kind that settles over a mind when the world finally begins to make sense. One of the quiet reasons Athene endured so powerfully in Greek memory is that she could belong to so many different kinds of spaces at once. In the city, she was the guardian of walls, markets, law courts, workshops, and assemblies. In the countryside, she could be honored in places of olive groves and rocky ridges, where the air felt open and dry, and the land seemed shaped by patient endurance. Her presence was often imagined not as a sudden flash of force, but as a steady intelligence settling over a place. This may be one reason her cult could feel so reassuring to ancient worshippers. Athene did not only protect in the dramatic moments of battle, she also protected the quieter order of life, the loom moving through fingers, the careful weighing of arguments, the fitting of stones in a wall, the measured planning of a city. In many local traditions, she was not merely a goddess who had arrived from somewhere else, but one who seemed woven into the very habits of civilized life itself. The Greeks knew this, and so Athene's image could be found in sanctuaries where people asked for practical guidance as much as victory. She belonged to both the bright air above citadels and the patient labor of daily living. In Athens, her most famous sanctuary rose on the Acropolis, that high limestone outcrop where the city's sacred and political life came together. The Parthenon, though often thought of simply as a temple, was also a deeply symbolic house for Athene as protector of the city. Its name, linked to the word Parthenos, evoked the goddess's virginity, but also a sense of purity, independence, and unclaimed power. The building itself was not just a place of prayer. It was a statement in stone, marble made to reflect order, proportion, and civic confidence. The sculptural program around the Parthenon, with its friezes and pediments, wrapped Athene into the history of Athens in a grand and carefully organized way. At the same time, the temple stood in dialogue with older sacred structures on the same hill, reminding us that religion in the ancient world was rarely simple or fixed. New monuments often grew around older memories. The result was a layered sacred landscape, where Athene's presence was accumulated, renewed, and reimagined over generations. Even now, the Acropolis can still suggest that blend of elevation and vigilance, as if the goddess's gaze were somehow still aligned with the city below. Athene's association with the owl is one of the most recognizable elements of her image, and yet the symbol is richer than a simple emblem. The owl, a creature active in darkness and known for its steady, unblinking eyes, became a natural companion to a goddess of intelligence and clear sight. Ancient coins from Athens often bore an owl alongside Athene's profile, giving the city a small portable image of wisdom and identity. The bird's presence may also have carried something of the night's hush, the feeling of a world observed in silence. In Greek art and literature, the owl could suggest watchfulness rather than chatter, insight rather than noise. That makes it especially fitting for a goddess who rewards judgment, planning, and careful perception. Some scholars have wondered whether the owl's importance in Athene's cult also reflects older connections between divine figures and birds of prey or night birds in the wider Mediterranean world. Whatever its deepest origin, the symbol became firmly Athenian. It traveled on silver drachmas and into the minds of people who never stood on the Acropolis itself. In that way, Athene's owl moved softly through history, carrying her reputation for clarity and steadiness into the ordinary circulation of money and memory. Another famous feature of Athene's mythology is her close relationship with weaving, an art that ancient Greek society treated with serious respect. Weaving was not merely decorative labor. It was an exacting craft requiring patience, memory, and a feel for pattern that unfolded thread by thread. Athene, as a goddess who understood practical skill, was imagined as a patron of this quiet intelligence. In myth, her artistry could be brilliant and even intimidating. The story of Arachne, who challenged Athene in weaving and was transformed after revealing her arrogance, shows how the craft could become a metaphor for rivalry between mortal ingenuity and divine authority. Yet it is important not to reduce the tale to punishment alone. The story also reveals how highly the Greeks valued technical excellence, even when they feared pride. In domestic life, weaving connected women to the rhythms of household work, and Athene's patronage gave that labor a sacred dimension. Her association with the loom also bridged the home and the polis. What was made in private hands could express public order, beauty, and memory. A woven cloth might display myths, processions, or patterns that mirrored the structure of a well-governed city. In this sense, Athene did not only inspire warriors and statesmen, she also stood beside the patient hands that made culture visible in thread. Athene's birth story is one of the most striking in all Greek mythology, and its imagery is as startling as it is symbolic. She is said to have sprung fully grown from the head of Zeus, armed and shining, after Hephaestus split open the god's skull with an axe. The scene is strange, even unsettling, but it captures something essential about her character. Athene emerges not through infancy or dependence, but through forceful manifestation of mind and authority. Many ancient readers understood this as a mythic expression of wisdom itself, since the head was imagined as the seat of thought. Her arrival from Zeus's head links her closely to his power, yet also preserves her independence. She is not simply a subordinate daughter. She is a distinct divine intelligence, complete at once. The story may also preserve older traces of goddess traditions that were adapted into the Olympian family system. Some scholars suggest that Athene's origins were not originally tied so neatly to Zeus, and that the myth of her birth helped integrate a powerful pre-Greek or regional deity into a patriarchal divine order. Whether read as theology, political symbolism, or poetic invention, the image remains unforgettable. A goddess of reason and battle stepping into the world already prepared, as if wisdom itself had become visible in an instant. Her role in warfare was unusually selective, and that selectiveness is part of what made her so respected. Athene was not the goddess of frenzy or indiscriminate destruction. That place belonged more closely to Ares, whose violence often seemed raw and unsettling in Greek imagination. Athene instead represented strategy, disciplined courage, defensive strength, and the kind of battle intelligence that can preserve a city rather than merely overwhelm an enemy. She was the goddess who could help a spear find its mark, but also the goddess who could keep an army organized and a leader clear-minded. In epic poetry, she often advises heroes, strengthens their resolve, or intervenes at decisive moments. Her protection could feel precise, almost surgical, compared with the noise and panic of open slaughter. This made her especially suitable for a polis like Athens, which liked to think of itself as rational, orderly, and politically self-aware. Yet even this self-image should not be taken too literally. Athens was a city capable of war, empire, and harsh decisions. Athene's presence did not erase violence. Instead, it gave violence a frame of intelligence and civic purpose. That is part of her complexity. She makes war look measured, and in doing so reveals the sober, almost chilling discipline that can lie beneath the language of honor. In many myths, Athene also appears as a guide to heroes who need more than courage. Perseus, Odysseus, Heracles, and others benefit from her practical help, whether through advice, tools, or timely intervention. Her gifts often arrive in forms that are small but transformative: a polished shield, a useful strategy, a clearer route through danger. With Odysseus especially, Athene becomes almost a divine counterpart to his own intelligence. He is cunning, adaptable, and verbally agile, qualities that place him close to her sphere. Their alliance reveals how Greek storytelling valued not only brute strength, but also intelligence under pressure. Athene's patronage of heroes often has a subtle educational quality. She does not merely save them, she teaches them how to act. In some tales, she transforms appearance, disguises identities, or creates conditions in which a person can reveal their best qualities at the right moment. This makes her a goddess of transitions as much as triumphs. She helps humans become themselves under testing conditions. The comfort of these stories may lie in that quiet promise that wisdom, if it comes at the right time, can turn confusion into order and danger into a path forward. In sleep and in storytelling alike, Athene remains one of the clearest figures of composed guidance. Athene's connection to the city of Athens was not symbolic alone. It was lived through ritual, festival, and public memory. One of the great expressions of this was the Panathenaea, a major festival held in her honor. At its height, the celebration included processions, sacrifices, athletic contests, musical competitions, and the offering of a beautifully woven robe or peplos to the goddess. The festival brought the entire civic body into ceremonial motion, from elites to common citizens, and it displayed the city to itself as a united community under Athene's watch. The peplos, often imagined as bearing woven images of divine or heroic scenes, is especially meaningful because it combines textile artistry with religious devotion and civic identity. In this way, the festival brought together several of Athene's domains at once, weaving intelligence, public order, and sacred protection. It also gave the city a recurring rhythm of renewal. Every cycle of celebration reminded Athenians that their identity was not static. It had to be presented, performed, and remade. Ancient festivals often carried a deep emotional texture, with incense, music, footsteps, and the movement of crowds up sacred slopes. Through such events, Athene was not just remembered, she was experienced as a living center of civic belonging. Athene also had an important relationship with the olive tree, a link that was especially meaningful in Athens itself. The myth of her contest with Poseidon for patronage of the city tells how she offered the olive tree, while Poseidon produced a saltwater spring or, in some versions, a horse. The citizens chose Athene's gift, and the city took her name. The olive tree was a brilliant symbol for a Mediterranean people. It provided oil, food, wood, light, and trade value. It was slow-growing, long-lived, and useful in many different ways. In a landscape where survival depended on making the most of dry terrain, The olive embodied practical abundance. Athene's gift was therefore not flashy but enduring, which fits her character beautifully. She was not the goddess of spectacle for its own sake, but of benefits that could sustain a community across seasons and generations. The myth also establishes a competition between force and cultivation. Poseidon's power is dramatic and watery, but Athene's offering is rooted, patient, and fruitful. The choice of the olive tree shows a preference for steadiness over display. In a broader symbolic sense, it reflects the values of a city that imagined itself as intelligent, self-sustaining, and ordered. The tree's silver-green leaves and quiet resilience continue to make the myth feel almost tangible. Another side of Athene appears in her many local titles, or epithets, which helped ancient worshippers understand her in context. She could be Athene Polias, protector of the city, Athene Nike, associated with victory, Athene Ergane, patron of craftsmen and labor, Athene Promachus, the champion who fought at the front, and many other forms as well. These names were not mere poetic ornaments. They reflected real cult practices and local emphases. A goddess honored in one sanctuary might have a slightly different character in another. This multiplicity is one of the most interesting things about ancient religion. Gods were not fixed in a single definition. They were known through relationships, places, and ritual habits. Athene's many names show how a divine figure could stretch across different human needs without losing coherence. A weaver might pray to Athene Ergane, while a city preparing for battle might call upon Athene Promachus, and a civic procession might honor Athene Polias with solemn care. The same goddess could be approached through distinct emotional registers: discipline, protection, craft, triumph, or guardianship. That adaptability may help explain her extraordinary endurance. She was not trapped inside one function. She could follow the changing life of the city and still remain recognizably herself, calm and bright within it all. Even Athene's more severe qualities were understood as part of balance rather than contradiction. She could be stern with arrogance, protective of law, and unforgiving toward disorder, yet she was not a goddess of senseless wrath. Her justice often had a cleansing or corrective quality. In the story of the contest over the patronage of Athens, for example, the issue is not merely who is stronger, but which gift serves the community better. That civic logic runs throughout her myths. She rewards skill, discipline, and respect for boundaries. She punishes hubris when necessary, but the larger pattern is one of ordering intelligence. In a dreamlike way, she resembles the clear line of a horizon after clouds have passed, or the quiet geometry of a temple scene in morning light. Ancient worshippers may have found comfort in that combination of vigilance and restraint. The goddess watching over them was formidable, but she was also understandable. She favored pattern over chaos, thought over impulse, measured action over waste. And so, as her image passed through stone, song, cloth, and story, Athene remained one of the most enduring presences in the Greek world. Not only a warrior and not only a wise one, but a goddess whose calm precision could make an entire city feel briefly, beautifully aligned. When ancient Greeks imagined Athene stepping into a scene, they often imagined a presence that did not need to hurry. She could arrive in a hush of certainty, as if thought itself had taken shape and begun to walk. One of the most enduring ideas about her was that she protected the measured use of intelligence rather than reckless cleverness. In stories, she is not simply the goddess of knowing things. She is the goddess of knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to speak in a way that changes the shape of events. This made her especially beloved in a world where judgment mattered as much as strength. Cities, councils, craftsmen, and generals could all ask for her favor, because wisdom was not only a private virtue. It was also a practical force, something that could steady a community like a hand on the rail of a ship in gentle water. Even her quietest myths carry this feeling that thought, properly ordered, can become a kind of shelter. That quality appears again in the way she is linked with weaving. In the ancient household, weaving was not a trivial pastime but a serious labor. one that required patience, memory, and exact attention. The loom was a place where pattern became visible thread by thread, and Athene's association with weaving seems to reflect that disciplined craft. She was said to have taught mortal women, or at least inspired their skill, and the myth of Arachne places her artistry beside human ambition in a story both beautiful and severe. Yet beyond the dramatic contest, there is something soft and almost restful in the image of Athene overseeing the loom. The shuttle moving back and forth, the rhythm of the threads, the careful joining of colours and shapes, all of this suits her nature as a goddess of ordered making. Some scholars have even suggested that her link with weaving may preserve very old memories of female skill and domestic wisdom in the Greek world, where textile work was bound up with status, identity, and the quiet architecture of daily life. In that sense, the loom becomes more than a tool. It becomes a place where Athene's intelligence rests in the hands. A related part of her character is her role as patron of crafts more broadly, especially those that require exactness and a relationship with materials. She was not a goddess of raw invention in the modern sense, but of intelligent skill, the kind of knowledge that emerges through practice and care. Bronze workers, potters, chariot makers, and shipbuilders could all see her reflected in their labor, because each of these arts depended on the balance of insight and technique. The ancient Greek word often associated with this kind of expertise is techne, a term that means something like craft, but with a richness that includes art, method, and disciplined know-how. Athene stands close to that whole world. She understands how things fit together. She knows how a handle should curve, how a seam should hold, how a shield should resist impact, how a plan should be built from smaller, reliable parts. This is perhaps why she can feel so calm as a divine figure. Her intelligence is not frantic. It is patient, structural, and quietly transformative, like a workshop lamp burning through the evening while hands keep working. Her connection with the olive tree offers another layer of this calm, rooted character. The olive was among the most important plants in the ancient Mediterranean, valuable for food, oil, light, healing, and trade. In Athens, the olive tree was deeply sacred, and one famous tradition told of Athene's contest with Poseidon for the patronage of the city. While Poseidon offered a saltwater spring or sea power, Athene offered the olive tree, and her gift was judged the better one for human life. Whether this story reflects a true archaic cult memory or a later civic explanation, it speaks clearly to Greek values. The olive represented endurance, usefulness, and quiet abundance. It did not blaze with sudden force, it grew slowly and lived long. In the sacred landscape of the Acropolis, the olive became a sign of Athene's practical generosity. Her gift was not merely symbolic victory. It was nourishment, oil for lamps, branches for peace, and wood that could be tended with care. Even now, the image of Athene and the olive feels restful, like a hillside holding sunlight in silver leaves. There is also a gentler side to her protection of heroes, especially those who needed not simply courage but clarity. Athene often assists figures who must navigate complex dangers: Odysseus, Perseus, Heracles in some traditions, and many others. Yet what she gives them is rarely brute power. She gives disguise, strategy, a word at the right moment, or a thought sharp enough to cut through confusion. Odysseus in particular seems almost inseparable from her. Their bond reflects a deep Greek fascination with intelligence under pressure, with the mind remaining awake in uncertainty. Athene admires the hero who can endure, observe, and choose well. She is present in the stories where a mortal must stand still long enough to see the opening in the darkness. That makes her feel strangely soothing as a divine companion. She does not demand constant motion. She encourages attentive stillness, the pause before the step, the breath before the answer. And in a world of sudden storms and uncertain roads, that sort of protection could seem as precious as armor. At the same time, Athene's virginity, one of the traits most consistently attached to her, has long invited interpretation. The ancient sources present her as a maiden goddess, untouched in the ordinary sense of marriage and sexual union, yet this does not reduce her to a narrow idea of purity. Instead, it marks her as self-contained, independent, and unclaimed by domestic hierarchy. She belongs to no husband. She is not folded into the cycles that define many other divine women. This made her unusual in the Greek pantheon, and perhaps especially powerful for that reason. Some modern scholars read this status as a symbolic expression of sovereignty because Athene's identity rests on autonomy and focus. She is complete in herself. She does not need to be absorbed into another will. In a culture where many female divine figures were linked to fertility, motherhood, or erotic force, Athene's virginity created a space for another kind of feminine presence, one grounded in authority, intelligence, and controlled energy. It is the still lake rather than the rushing stream, reflective and deep. Her famous association with the city of Athens deepened all of this into something civic and almost architectural. The city took its name from her, and the relationship between goddess and polis was nurtured through temples, festivals, statues, and political memory. The Acropolis, crowned by the Parthenon and other sacred structures, became not only a religious center but a visual statement of collective identity. Athene was the guardian of the city's strength, yet also of its reason. In the imagination of Athenians, she watched over assemblies, laws, military readiness, and public order. This is one reason she can seem so modern in spirit. She is not limited to private devotion. She belongs to civic life. The polis itself, with its debates and decisions, its trade routes and walls, its rituals and ambitions, could be seen as a kind of large-scale weaving, and Athene as the intelligence that keeps the pattern from unraveling. Standing beneath her temple columns, one could feel the weight of stone, the slow labor of builders, and the idea that civilization itself is a form of careful making. The festivals devoted to her reveal another aspect of this communal presence. Among the most important was the Panathenaea, a great celebration in Athens that included processions, sacrifices, athletic contests, and the presentation of a woven peplos, a robe made for the goddess. This robe, richly decorated and carried with ceremonial care, was perhaps one of the most striking symbols of her cult. It joined textile art, civic pride, religious offering, and public spectacle into a single moving image. The procession itself must have been a gradual and vivid affair, full of music, dust, fabric, and sunlight on bronze. The people of the city would have seen themselves gathered into a shared rhythm, bringing the product of labor and devotion to their patron goddess. Some details of the festival changed over time, and not every feature is perfectly certain in the historical record, but the central meaning remains clear. Athene was honored not only as a war goddess or mythic figure, but as the enduring intelligence behind public life. The robe she received was a sign that beauty, craft, and citizenship could be woven together. Her warlike side is often misunderstood if it is imagined as simple aggression. Athene is indeed a battle goddess, but she stands apart from the frenzy associated with indiscriminate violence. She is often shown in armor, carrying the spear and shield, yet her warfare is calculated, defensive, and strategic. This distinction mattered greatly in the ancient Greek imagination. War was not merely an outburst of force. It was also planning, discipline, and the ability to see the field clearly. Athene's battle presence could be steady rather than wild, and that steadiness may be one reason she came to symbolize just war, or at least disciplined war, in contrast to chaos. Her aegis, the protective goatskin or shield-like emblem associated with her, often appears in art with the head of the Gorgon, a terrifying image that simultaneously frightens enemies and guards the goddess herself. Even here, the impression is not of uncontrolled destruction, but of danger harnessed to purpose. The fear she inspires has a boundary. It is contained, directed, and fitted to protection. Ancient art gives us some of the most enduring visions of this controlled power. On vases, reliefs, statues, and temple pediments, Athena appears in forms that vary from austere and regal to active and dynamic. Sometimes she is helmeted and motionless, a figure of composed authority. Sometimes she moves with a fluid grace that suggests readiness without tension. Later famous images, such as the chryselephantine statue of Athene Parthenos by Phidias, are known only through descriptions, copies, and echoes in the historical record, yet they still contribute to her aura. That colossal statue would have glittered with gold and ivory, a magnificent presence in the Parthenon, embodying divine grandeur as well as civic pride. Even in smaller works, her iconography is remarkably consistent. The helmet, the spear, the shield, the owl, the aegis. These symbols created a visual language that ancient viewers could read at a glance. They understood that Athene was both near and elevated, a goddess whose stillness held latent movement, like a drawn bow resting in perfect balance. The owl, perhaps more than any other animal associated with her, has remained a quiet emblem of Athene through the centuries. In the ancient world, owls were linked to night sight, watchfulness, and perhaps a kind of lucid attention that could function even in darkness. On Athenian coinage, the owl appears beside the goddess as a familiar and compact symbol of the city itself. Its round eyes and calm stance give it a strangely contemplative air, almost as if it were thinking before it moves. Some have suggested that the owl's connection to Athene may also reflect older local bird symbolism, while others see it as an extension of her role as a goddess of wisdom and alertness. Either way, the bird fits her beautifully. It suggests the ability to perceive what others cannot, not through haste but through quiet readiness. In the stillness of the night, when ordinary sight becomes uncertain, Athene's owl seems to keep the world gently under observation. And finally, there is something especially graceful about the way Athene endures across time. She was not forgotten when Greek religion changed, nor when the temples fell silent. She passed into later art, literature, philosophy, and even modern language, where her name still evokes intelligence, strategy, and composed strength. She has become a figure through whom people continue to think about wisdom that is not detached from action. Her legacy survives in classrooms, museums, poems, and stories, but also in the soft idea that knowledge can be calm, protective, and beautifully ordered. When we look back at Athene across the long centuries, we see not only a goddess of ancient Athens, but a symbol of the mind at its best, attentive, patient, and capable of making peace with complexity. She remains in many ways a guardian of measured thought, and that is perhaps why her presence feels so enduring, so steady, and so quietly reassuring in the dark. By the time Athene appears in the later myths, she is no longer only a warrior goddess or a guardian of cities. She has also become one of the great figures of the Greek imagination for wisdom itself, and that change happens slowly, almost quietly, across centuries of storytelling. Early Greek religion did not always separate sharp intelligence from practical skill or strategy from craftsmanship. Athene gradually gathers all of these qualities together. She becomes the one who knows how to plan, how to judge, how to measure a situation before acting. In a world shaped by sudden storms, difficult journeys, and unstable politics, that kind of calm intelligence would have felt deeply reassuring. Her wisdom is not the abstract wisdom of books in a library, but the kind that keeps a household standing, a city defended, and a promise carefully kept. Ancient poets often present her as alert and clear-eyed, never rushed, never clouded by impulse. Even when myths place her in the middle of danger, she remains composed, almost cool to the touch in the imagination. It is as if her mind moves like polished stone under lamplight, steady and reflective, drawing everything around her into order. This quality of judgment becomes especially important in the stories of heroes, because Athene so often appears as the divine helper of difficult decisions. In the Odyssey, she is constantly near Odysseus, not simply protecting him, but encouraging the cleverness that allows him to survive. Her role there is subtle and beautiful. She does not always strike enemies down herself. Instead, she strengthens disguise, timing, memory, and patience. She helps him think ahead. This makes her distinct from gods who act through raw force or overwhelming emotion. Athene belongs to the realm of the measured response, the well-placed word, the plan formed in silence. Ancient audiences would have understood that kind of aid as powerful beyond measure. In a society where the right action at the right moment could mean safety or disaster, her presence would have felt like a blessing of the mind itself. And because of this, later Greek and Roman writers often treat her as the divine patron of intelligence, not just bravery, but bravery guided by reason. It is a quieter form of heroism, one that does not need to announce itself loudly to be effective. At the same time, Athene's connection to the arts of making is equally important. She is deeply associated with weaving, spinning, and skilled handiwork, which may seem far from battle at first, but in the ancient world these were among the highest expressions of order, discipline, and intelligence. Weaving was not merely domestic labor. It required planning, patience, memory, and a sense of pattern. A finished textile could hold stories, status, and identity within its threads. In some myths, Athene herself is credited with teaching people how to weave or how to improve their craft. In others, she competes in weaving contests, where her artistry is both beautiful and exact. The image of the goddess at the loom carries a gentle kind of symbolism. The threads move under her hands, the way events move under her understanding. She brings structure out of scattered strands, and perhaps that is why her association with weaving stayed so strong across generations. It offered a visual language for intelligence that is careful, creative, and quietly commanding. The loom becomes almost an extension of her mind, a place where invisible thought becomes visible pattern. One of the most famous stories associated with Athenian weaving is the contest with Arachne, a mortal woman whose skill becomes so great that it invites divine attention. The tale survives in a number of versions, but the essential shape remains haunting. Arachne is gifted, bold, and perhaps too confident for her own safety. She weaves with dazzling mastery, and Athene, often understood as the protective patron of craftspeople, challenges her or responds to her pride. The contest itself is a marvel in mythic form, not a clash of armies but a clash of artistry. Both figures create tapestries so vivid that the scene feels almost alive. Yet the story also carries warnings about humility, boundaries, and the dangerous closeness between excellence and self-assertion. Ancient readers may have seen in it a reflection of social realities, where skill could be admired and resented at the same time. The tale of Arachne is remembered because it is not simple. It does not reduce Athene to jealousy, nor Arachne to arrogance alone. Instead, it preserves the tension between human accomplishment and divine authority, between creative freedom and the limits set by reverence. Even in its darker versions, the story remains tied to the delicate art of making cloth, where every thread matters and every design reveals something about the maker. Athene's famous shield, the Aegis, also deserves slow attention because it is one of the most distinctive signs of her power. In art and poetry, the Aegis is often shown as a protective animal skin, usually linked with frightening force and divine protection. Sometimes it appears decorated with the head of Medusa, whose gaze can turn enemies to stone. The precise origins of the Aegis are not entirely clear, and scholars have long debated how ancient and how symbolic it may be. It may have roots in older Near Eastern or pre-Greek traditions, or it may have developed through a long process of mythic layering. What remains constant is its atmosphere of awe. The Aegis is not merely armor. It is a sacred object that radiates fear to those who oppose Athene and safety to those she favors. When heroes or cities fall under its protection, they are placed inside a stronger order. The shimmering, unsettling power of the Aegis reminds us that Athene's wisdom is never weak. It can be serene, but it is not soft. It includes the capacity to frighten chaos away. In this way, the goddess embodies a kind of defense that is both elegant and terrible, like a bright blade hidden beneath a cloak. Her link to Athens, of course, is one of the most important parts of her legacy, and it is a relationship that shaped one of the great cities of the ancient world. According to the most famous version of the myth, Athene and Poseidon competed for patronage of the city. Poseidon struck the ground and offered salt water or a horse, depending on the telling. Athene offered the olive tree. The people chose her gift and the city became hers. This story does more than explain a name. It reveals values. The olive tree was not flashy. It was patient, productive, and enduring. It gave food, oil, light, and wood. It was a gift for daily life, for trade, for ritual, and for peace. In choosing Athene, the city chose a form of power that nourishes rather than merely overwhelms. The Acropolis rose as her stronghold, and her great temple, the Parthenon, became one of the most celebrated monuments in the ancient world. Even now, the stone of Athens seems to hold the echo of her presence. Scholars still debate how much of the myth was shaped by politics, how much by older cult practice, and how much by later civic pride, but all agree that Athene became inseparable from the identity of the city. She was not just worshipped there, she was imagined as the city's wise and watchful soul. The Panathenaea Athens, great festival in honor of Athene, brought that relationship into public life with music, athletic contests, sacrifice, and ceremony. It was one of the grandest celebrations in the Athenian calendar, and it tied religion to civic identity in a vivid and memorable way. The festival included processions, offerings, and competitions that displayed both strength and refinement. Perhaps the most famous element was the presentation of a specially woven peplos, a sacred robe for the goddess. The cloth itself carried mythic scenes and was prepared with great care, reinforcing once again Athene's bond to weaving. The festival was not just a religious event. It was a performance of the city's values, uniting citizens around shared memory and devotion. One can imagine the warm dust of the roads, the sound of flutes, the orderly movement of participants, and the gleam of bright fabric in the sun. In that setting, Athene would have been felt not as a distant abstraction, but as a living presence woven into civic time. Festivals like this gave her worship a rhythm, a yearly breathing pattern, where gratitude, artistry, and discipline came together in a public offering of respect. Athene also appears in unexpected places, especially in stories about craftsmen, inventors, and technologies that made life more stable. She is sometimes linked to horses, chariots, ships, and even the invention or improvement of tools. This reflects an ancient understanding that intelligence belongs not only to thought, but to practical form. A ship is a kind of argument against distance. A chariot is a way of organizing speed. A well-made tool allows human hands to accomplish what strength alone cannot. Athene's influence over these things suggests that civilization itself was partly imagined as her gift. Not the luxury of civilization, but its structure, the things that let people build, travel, measure, and remember. In some traditions, she guides builders or helps heroes create important objects. In others, she lends strategic insight to the making of war machines or defensive works. This broad range makes her difficult to confine to a single role. She moves easily between battlefield and workshop, between palace and street, between thought and material craft. Her presence in these stories reminds us that the ancient Greeks often saw no sharp line between invention and wisdom. To make well was to think well, and to think well was, in a sense, to serve Athene. Another quiet but important part of Athene's character is her unusual position among the Greek gods as a virgin goddess. This aspect of her identity has been interpreted in many ways. Some scholars see it as a sign of independence, a divine autonomy that places her outside the ordinary structures of marriage and family. Others note that virginity in the ancient world could symbolize protection, self-possession, or ritual purity, rather than simply sexual status in the modern sense. Whatever the exact meaning in each context, Athene's virginity contributes to her image as self-contained and disciplined. She is not defined through romantic attachment. and this sets her apart from many other divine figures whose stories are shaped by desire, jealousy, and union. Instead, Athene remains focused, oriented toward purpose. This does not make her distant in a cold way. Rather, it gives her a striking clarity. She can guide, teach, defend, and advise without being diverted. In myth, that quality often makes her especially dependable. Heroes trust her because she is not easily swept away. Cities trust her because she is stable. Worshippers may have felt that her purity belonged to the same family of meanings as order, sound judgment, and the careful maintenance of sacred boundaries. Even her animal associations carry this same quiet intelligence. The owl, perhaps her most enduring symbol, became linked with Athene because of its watchfulness and its ability to see in the dark. The creature's large eyes and nocturnal habits made it an obvious emblem for wisdom, and in Athens the owl appears frequently on coins, art, and decorative objects. It is a small image, but an unforgettable one. A coin bearing the owl and Athene's face could travel through markets, hands, and lives, carrying her presence into the rhythms of commerce. The olive tree, too, belongs to her world in a profound way. Its grey-green leaves, slow growth, and long life all match her calm strength. Together, owl and olive form a language of her character: alertness and endurance, vision and sustenance. These are not dramatic symbols in the way a thunderbolt might be, but they are perhaps more lasting. They root Athene in the natural world of Athens and the wider Greek landscape, where animals, trees, and gods were never entirely separate. They remind us that wisdom in the ancient imagination could be embodied in everyday things, in the hush of night and the patient shimmer of leaves. And finally, Athene's long afterlife in later culture shows how deeply her image penetrated beyond the ancient world. Roman writers identified her with Minerva, carrying her into a new imperial context, while Renaissance artists revived her as an emblem of learning, strategy, and noble authority. In modern times, she appears in literature, sculpture, political symbolism, and even popular storytelling as a figure of reasoned strength, yet she never becomes entirely simple. Each age seems to find something new in her: a guardian of knowledge, a symbol of justice, a companion to craft, a stern but fair presence in moments of decision. This flexibility may be one reason she endured so strongly. Athene can stand for many things without losing her recognizable calm. She belongs to the old world of temples and sacrifice, but also to the abstract world of ideals. She is ancient and adaptable at once. And when people continue to invoke her, whether in scholarship or art or quiet reflection, they are often reaching for the same feeling the Greeks once knew so well: the comfort of intelligence guided by courage, the stillness of a mind that sees clearly, and the reassuring sense that order can be made, kept, and gently defended.